Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shadowcasters Network. And tonight we are going to be gabbing about tabletop RPGs. Tonight, we would have been playing Cyberpunk Red, Punk's Not Dead, our actual play set in Night City using the Cyberpunk Red, Quick Start system. But Trav, unfortunately, last minute had to call out sick. He's not feeling well, so we wish him the best. And we should be back in 2 Mondays from now. That's going to be October 28th for the continuation of our campaign. Yay. So, with me tonight are all of our players from the Cyberpunk Red system, and you might also recognize them from various shows across our network, including Join the Anarchy, which is where we originally all started from, plus Guardian Allies, Scrim is GMing one of the Optiverse series, and Paige, who is on Shattered Isles, also here on the network, and also on Friday Night Frights over on Original Box Set.
Yeah.
Am I missing any of your works, the current works?
No, but I am soon going to be part of a show that is similar to this exactly. Talking about RPGs pretty soon. I don't.
Oh,
have
really?
I don't have any concrete details at the moment, but I'll keep you updated as things develop.
Where's that going to be?
Starting in November. I believe, I'm not sure if we're streaming it or if we're like doing a recorded kind of recording live kind of deal podcast, but yeah, there'll be a few people that are, some of the people are part of the Shadowcasters Network as well, and so yeah, once I have more details I'll let you guys all know. But
nice, exciting.
that is the only other, I'm really pumped. So that's the other thing that I have coming up soon, other than these two, Guardian Allies and Cyberpunk Red.
Yeah. How about you, Paige?
I'm not doing anything else other than Shattered Isles and Cyberpunk Red.
And what about Friday Night Frights? Did that end already? Or you did?
It's ended.
Oh,
yeah.
How did it go?
It went well.
First off, let's let our audience know who may not know, right, about Friday Night Frights. Like, if you had to pitch that in 2 sentences,
sure.
what would you do?
Friday Night Frights is a home brewed entire campaign. The roles are new. The roles are created by the GM. Whatever. It's about I think X-Files. It's like X-Files mixed with like horror. Just more horror than normal. It's a thrill horror type of game, and I played as an FBI agent who went around investigating murder and multiple murders to find a serial killer, and it turned out to be a little more spooky than normal.
Nice. So how did it all go? Like, if you had to rate the campaign, your experience as a whole.
Like a 10 out of 10 type of thing.
Yeah. Maybe that's not the best way to go. Why don't we do this? How since you were playing a horror game, how do you feel it succeeded in making you feel like holy shit?
Oh, there were multiple times where things happened. I don't get skeeved out by CSI scenes or anything like that, because I took a class in high school and I'm just a sick fuck. But I have a very dark sense of humor sometimes. But there were multiple times. There was a moment where my character drove to the grocery store to pick up some food because he was going to have breakfast at his hotel because he had to wait for his partner to show up, and it was like 3 a.m. And while he was in the store, the lights kept turning off, but it wasn't like at the same time. It was one by one getting closer.
Ooh, and then, I love those.
And then I had a feeling of being followed, but I couldn't really see anything. And on the way home, my car completely died on a stretch of road where just trees lined everything.
Oh, that's unusual.
And so while it died, I was basically sitting there like, all right, well, I guess I'll get out and walk. Mm-hmm. And I started walking down the road, and the surrounding sounds completely like stopped. Like, there were no bug sounds or anything. And there was like I could hear something in the trees, and then my car started back up, and then the bugs started chirping again. But from saying that doesn't work. It doesn't give the same appeal, because during that time we were actually playing like bug sounds in the background on Roll20 and all that fun stuff.
That's neat.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it was actually like executed really well, and plus like the anticipation, that the leading up to it, the subtlety and everything leading up to it was really nice. Nothing happened. I wasn't attacked or anything. Anticipation.
No, anticipation. Yeah,
you need red lipstick, man.
Yeah, I know. Oh my god, Rocky Horror is the best.
Dress up as that for Halloween.
I really want Dr. Dr. Frankenberger. Wait, not Frankenfurter. I'm thinking Bobby Frankenberger.
Yeah.
Dr. Frankenfurter is. I feel like I could pull that shit off with aplomb.
You could.
So
definitely.
I have to do that. Well, A, that sounds awesome. B, did this happen? This probably happened after Gen Con, right?
Yes.
I ask this
maybe
because
I have to look at my planner.
So I ask this because Max and Cassie were your GMs. They're the ones from Shattered Isles. And we had a very long conversation in the car ride from our Airbnb to Gen Con about the inclusion of music and sound effects and how it like really helps and enhance stuff. And I love that because they found out about Sirenscape at that convention. And Sirenscape, I mean, we know Sirenscape now because we're starting to use it for our Cyberpunk Red game. But Sirenscape, for those who don't know in chat, is like a sound effects / background music mixer where you can just like select a bunch of different soundscapes within a certain theme, and you can like each have volume sliders, and like you can set up different profiles and stuff. So like you enter a scene and here's your tavern, or here's your cyberpunk club, and
it's really cool.
It's super cool. And so I love that they definitely looks like they've been taking that into account and adding that production value, that layer into your game. So
I haven't opened up Sirenscape for them yet, but it sounds like that's going to. I would love for that to happen because for one, when the year that I decided to create a campaign, I was obsessed with finding sound and music because I was also running a horror campaign, and I wanted to make sure I had all the music and the sounds and everything like that. But yeah, that was a good session. There was also times where my character was attacked. That was really creepy and spooky. There was also another time I can't think of what was actually happening, but it was raining in game, and like I think it was like the last cycle of the full moon, and that was important for the campaign. I won't spoil it, but it's over. You should watch it by now. But but here in Michigan, it was thunderstorming and we had a full moon out. So I was like, well, that's perfect. So just that alone and the atmosphere and everything, Max did a really, really good job at.
Look, I'm not going to lie.
I think the theme.
Go ahead.
I think that sound effects obviously add another dimension to a game. They enrich it quite significantly if you can do it even moderately well. But then I think the question there is the 90-10 rule. You can work on a game and do prep for, I don't know, maybe you spend 3 hours prepping for a couple of games. You could spend another 3 hours, and that 3 hours will get you to 90%, where you have a game that is like right here. You spend another 3, 4, 5 hours, you get that last 10%. At what point do you make that call? We all have limited time, right? So at what point do you say, okay, the perfect sound effect is going to be secondary to me getting 8 hours of sleep?
I think for me,
or are there games where it's indispensable?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I plan anything, if I plan anything, right? Because obviously, like, join the anarchy, I don't have to plan. But like, I have stuff loaded on the side for the eventuality if I need them. But for other games like that I prep for, I think of like the big moments that I know for sure I want to hit.
Yeah.
And if I think there has to be like, if I just know like when I'm feeling the zen of that scene in my head, right? And I'm just like, there needs to be a certain sound. Like if I was planning that scene that Paige described where, you know, she's walking down the streets after her car has, you know, stopped working and the bugs stop and there's silence, like that's
gosh.
a moment, you know, like, and if you can,
I can just get chills thinking about it.
Exactly. That's good game prep time. And so that's a moment that I would create. And if I don't create sound effects for the rest of the scenario, I don't care because I highlighted that moment. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe even just one or two times. Yeah. If you can get it once or twice throughout a game, you don't have to have like the wheeling of the car, the opening of the door, like all those,
all the little things. Like
birds.
For example, the sound of my car dying wasn't a thing. It was just the background sounds of bugs and like chirping and whatever, and that was it. There was no like ambiance music. That was just it. But yeah, I think, I don't know. When I was making my campaign, I pretty much had everything that I could for certain areas, and then if the players wanted to go, I don't know, fucking in the woods, literally and figuratively, I had for that. So like
my character would never have done that. She's a good girl.
She brought condoms with her, boy.
Just in case. Just in case. She, at the very least, wrap it.
Okay.
But
good girl.
yeah, no.
No, but she was a good girl.
She was totally the good girl. She was a virgin.
She totally wasn't pole dancing with the pool cue. No.
Did I do that? Oh god, I don't even remember. Anyway, so you know.
No, it was even during the session when we were even that game when that happened. I remember I didn't have any like party music because one of the NPCs was like, "Oh, I'm gonna put on my iPod," and I was like, "So he's just gonna play some shit rap music," and then Oz was like, "Dude, play some music." So I had to find some on Roll20 at the time. And I found like the worst cheesy rap song you could find, and everybody was like, "Yeah!"
Yes.
That's the only thing I didn't have. I had like, I had all of the horror things. I had sound effects for like scratching and stuff, and.
But you know what? I mean, sometimes when random things like that come up, and like the players demand that they hear it, like, you know, it's cool to just take a minute and be like, hold on, like
let me
search and just play whatever you can, however you can.
With Guardian Allies, I spent about, I don't know, an hour and a half before the first session going through, and I just do it on Roll20, a bunch of different songs. And I go through and I give them like descriptors. So one is like creepy, scary, suspenseful, and then the other one says something like contemplative, piano. And so I kind of have an idea what it is. So if you listen to the Guardian Allies one from last night, a couple times I started and stopped some music. If you're listening closely,
I do that all the time.
Like, I'm like, oh, no, not that one. But there was 2 or 3 moments last night where I would like hit the song at just like the perfect moment. There was like an emotional kind of like, there's this one character going through some PTSD and sort of like helping her, like another one was helping her deal with it. And so she like, it was like, just as they're like talking. And then there was a big reveal dramatic moment right at the end. And I was like, oh God, I have something for this. And I had totally forgotten. So I'm like scrolling through my list. I'm like, oh, where is it? Yes, dramatic reveal. Dun, dun, dun. It wasn't that one, but it was like, yeah. So
nice.
It was, sometimes you just nail it, right? And you can't, I think with horror, soundscapes are really important.
I agree.
Because hearing and not seeing something is always creepy.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. When I was doing it, a friend at the time who was helping me, he was telling me like, if you're not going to describe it in detail, do it enough where it still leaves an uncanny valley and a blank slate for the characters to be like, oh, this is what it looks like. Because it's one of those things. It's pretty much common things if you ever get skeeved by being in your basement when it's dark out. Like, you don't know what's in the dark, so your brain already comes up with images of what it could be.
Exactly.
So like if you don't give enough details of what it is, then at least put music in to help that uneasy feeling, or again that uncanny valley of what it could be. So that's what I followed.
That was kind of the ethos of H.P. Lovecraft when he wrote the when he wrote his series, that he never really described the old ones very well, and they were always very vague, and that made them worse. Yeah, made them feel more horrible. So I think you're right. Small descriptions can be really good. And the other thing about it too is I find that Pathfinder is really they do this a lot. They'll kind of bury the lead. So you go into a room and you see a space, and they're like, there's a flagstone floor and moss growing on the walls and sconces flickering in the corners, and also a giant undead dragon. I really think that's the first thing that you notice.
One of my favorite things. I understand why GMs do this, but it still it's a pet peeve of mine, is going, hey, how big is the room? And then they're like, well, the room is like yellow plush carpet and like wood paneling walls, there's a couch, and I'm like, great, how big is the room? And I never get an answer.
I don't know. That means I don't know. That means I did not.
That means let me cover this up with flowery language, help you build the space in your head. It can be as big as you want it to be. How big does this description sound?
That's like okay, yeah, but like if I'm a wizard and I'm casting fireball, I want to know the space. I understand that it helps the person puts you in the room, puts you in the mindset, but like when I ask a question that I just need that one answer, I'm like, I don't care what color the couch is. How big is the room? Because I want to blow things up.
Speaking of some questions, I wanted to go through chat because I saw some good questions or just comments that were being made. I just want to address them before we move on. So one was, didn't Oz give suggestions that made it way scarier in regards to Friday Night Frights? So all I know that I did was I had Paige's GM in Max and Cassie. They were staying in my house for a little while they were doing a convention, and we played the tabletop RPG Dread, the version with the Jenga tower, not the one that Paige knows and loves.
No. Yeah, I love that one.
That I also know and love, but I love both of these. But anyway, so this one with the Jenga tower, it's a horror game where the only mechanic is you pull from the Jenga tower when you would typically do a roll, and if you pull it, you succeed. If you choose to abandon it, you take a consequence. Like you fail and take a consequence, but you don't die. If the Jenga tower falls over, you die. You're out of the game. So as the thing gets ricketier, like the suspense like really ratchets up. Anyway, so like that really inspired them to like reconceive Friday Night Frights and make it but do it in a dice system. So what they came up with was like you have like an array of results that Paige had to pick from. And as she was picking, like, so there's bad results and good results and some in the middle, and then she's picking, right? And I had them be like, okay, don't just do like a totally random array. Do like, have a couple of set numbers, like low numbers, set some high numbers, and then random array the ones in the middle, and then pull from that. And so yeah.
Yeah, we did that on our last session. That was the system we decided to change to, which I wasn't that happy with because it was the last session, and two, there were definitely
they decided to change it at the very last session.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So
okay.
So it was the last session, and then it worked, and it would have worked for an entire campaign. I just think that in a certain setting like that, especially for me, like I need to have. What are the things that before I go on a rant about this, for me, a GM, they aren't there to purposely kill you off your character. No. So if for example I do take a bad roll, which I had multiple times, I always had that sneaking feeling. Well, I was like, well, I'm dead. This is a horror campaign. It's going to happen. And that's what I didn't really care for, because it like I said, it was at the end and I wasn't used to it. it worked for the suspense, but I did everything in my power to make it a little more delicate for me. For instead of running in and fighting or whatever, I was staying back and hiding, and instead of searching for, we lost one of our companions towards the end. I don't know if they're dead or alive, but like I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna grab this person and get the fuck out. They can fend for themselves, because I didn't want to pick from that pool. And at that point, I was already like in the clear in my head.
And that sounds though like that is what you would want from a horror game. I read a very interesting comment actually today. Somebody mentioned like in real life, if you were in this situation, even if you were a badass, right? Like if you were in this situation, you would probably turn and run.
Oh, definitely.
But like that's the first thing that you would do.
Yeah.
Nope the fuck out. Fighting is the last thing that you do. And in a tabletop RPG, fighting is the first thing that you do, and running is the last thing. And you're right, because you're just like, go in here, fucking kill everything, loot.
It was nice because in this setting was very realistic with the you know, the supernatural elements to it. But like, there were moments where my character Elliot was basically like, no, I'm not gonna do that. Like, I will get fired if I do that. Like, I want to keep my job. Even though in a different other campaign, I would have totally been like, yeah, fuck that, I'll do it. But I wanted to keep a little more realism. And even when in the beginning, when they were talking about the possibilities of what this could be, what this thing that is causing these murders could be, Elliot basically kind of went, now this sounds crazy, but hear me out. Aliens. Like, so, there were multiple times. Yeah, there were multiple times where that had happened, and his partner always gave him a look. But like, it was even weird for me in certain areas where things kept piling up and like pointing to a different direction that wasn't human or wasn't realistic. And in my head, I was like, this can't be right because it's not realistic. But it, you know, it ended up working and everything like that. But like I said, in certain situations, I definitely made him more human than a character. But towards the end, I wanted to make sure at least I lived and my partner lived. And it boiled down to me just going like, all right, I'm going to hide in this corner.
Yeah.
Because I can't really do much. But I think, like I said, I even told Max, if we ended up doing another like Friday Night Frights campaign style, either with, you know, whatever, I wouldn't mind doing that system. I'd have to get used to it.
Yeah. Because
I'm definitely used to the systems I am used to right now with just rolling chance dice and being like, all right, I fucked up because my dice fucked me over. Whereas now it's, if you decided to choose the really bad one, you fucked yourself over. So you played yourself. But yeah. But it turned out great. Word of warning, Cole, because you asking about it, anyone that matter, if you do end up watching it from the beginning, it's slow. This is a murder mystery. You're watching me literally trying to think of who done it and who's going to be next and where do I go next. So it's slow. There are definitely times where there's like a lull of like nothing's happening. It's because we're talking about clues that we both found. There is definitely roleplay in the game and everything, but the majority of the whole entire game is me trying to figure out who done it and everything like that, which I didn't mind. I didn't mind playing that, especially. I mean,
if people go into it knowing that that's what they're going to get, then great, you know, because I think there's definitely it's definitely not something that I think that we hear a lot of when it comes to actual plays, you know? So I think that's unique. It's unique.
Oh, I loved it. I loved it because because Max came up with this entire murder plot in his head. And what I absolutely love is that all of the characters that I met had different personalities and families and backgrounds, and they were also linked to the case somehow, or I was either questioning some random people or whatever. But like, no matter what, everything was kind of, the answers were there. I just had to put them together. And I explained it better in one session, but I really loved that. And I love that mainly because I like character design and character creation. So like watching Max create all these different characters. For example, there's one character that has Alzheimer's, and he gets his memory back at one point, and he calls my agent, and he's just crying because he suddenly remembers all this stuff, and I have to tell him to put like an item somewhere, basically because this is the only time he's going to remember it. And I really liked that, and it was also heartbreaking. But like, I just love just that. And then I was organizing my notes outside of game, and I have a notebook somewhere literally with all my notes and like notes
like
style.
Conspiracy note style.
Yeah,
like, fuck it.
Yeah, literally.
That's awesome.
And I wrote it in the way Elliot would write it, so to help me, you know, get into the character and whatnot. And literally
awesome.
at like 2 a.m, I text Max and I go, why would this guy be up at 3 a.m. in this place? It doesn't make sense. And so like I start like theorizing with him, and he's doing that thing of going, oh, why would he? You know?
What a good question.
So like the next that next session, I ended up going back to that place and talking to that person. But like, yeah, I got so into it where I literally read it through all my notes again, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why didn't I question this person more? Like,
so to jump off of that comment you made there, that you don't see this a lot in APs, I think my suspicion is it's hard to make that compelling because you are, I mean, think about a TV show, people avoid expository dialogue as much as possible, and that's kind of all it is. Like, what if it was this? What if it was that? And if you're 4 people all invested sitting around a table, then you might be able to keep it interesting, but I would say it'd be a significant challenge to do it for an audience.
And especially where it was, Paige, you were the only player, right?
Yeah, that's what I was also about to add. I was the only player.
Yeah.
If you had multiple people, it would have been different.
Yeah, so you had your own brain that was like wheeling around like what all the possibilities could be. But I assume though, it sounds like you had NPCs that Max and Cassie had set up for you to bounce off of.
Oh, definitely. My partner, Garrett Klaus. Okay. Something like that.
So like that created at least a dynamic. So it's not just like, wait, well, what if it's this? And then not having like a feedback, right? To like,
especially if it's hard to articulate when it's just you.
Yeah.
But I think that would almost be the better way to do it, just to have one person, because then you're not like tossing wild theories all over the place.
Yeah, and especially because that other NPC is the GMs, right? So they give leading, they lead you, hopefully. They help lead your hopefully, right? Like they also could help mislead you, but like they give little like pinpoints of what is a possibility.
Breadcrumbs.
They keep you on the road. Yeah, exactly. They keep you on a road so that you're not like going off a total wild tangent and wasting potential time.
Yeah.
I
think if there was multiple people, it should have been styled like a dinner murder party.
Because have you ever done a dinner murder party?
Yes.
I have.
Yeah. If anybody has ever done a dinner murder party, you're usually in a group of people that are all trying to solve this murder. Whether you're the killer or somebody else is, you're trying to solve it together.
It's
so
fun.
so like if Friday Night Frights, that style ended up becoming a campaign with say 5 people, including the GM, so 4 players, I would suggest doing it like a dinner party. We should totally
do a dinner party, like
that would be fun.
Murder mystery dinner party stream.
So funny.
Yeah, that would be so fun. That would be cute.
That would be hilarious.
I have another question. I think this has a little bit to do with how many players are at the table and how you're interacting. So have you ever played a game where you didn't actually role play and you just sort of spoke as though you weren't, like, as your character is sort of in third person?
Definitely seen moments like that before. Like like what you're saying is, instead of saying I do this, you kind of go like, oh yeah, my character, whatever the name is, right? My character is probably going to do something along these lines, right? Like says something like this for the intent of whatever, and because like you don't necessarily feel confident, or like you don't want to take the time to detail and go into the role play of it, because maybe it's something that's kind of like this seems like kind of a throwaway thing. Can I just ask about this, but not actually, like, can I ask like, for example, can I ask about why this person was gone at 3 a.m, or why they were there at 3 a.m, right? Can I ask about that, but not actually say, like, go to that person's house, say, and start that whole process all over again.
And then I blah blah blah. So to kind of like speed things up. So the reason I'm asking is because I was listening to the One Shot podcast where they do a bunch of different things to the system, and they played this system called For the Queen, where you basically answer questions about your character. Every character at the table loves the queen, and then they ask questions like, when did the queen embarrass you and why? What secret do you have about the queen that you would never tell? And then they would describe like a narrative, almost like a little short story about what happened. So like, I saw the queen, murder someone or something, and you kind of describe like my character did this. And I kept waiting like, oh, okay, is it eventually going to start? People are going to be like, oh, and then I say this, and then I roll these dice. But it just is all narrative of the past. And so you describe in third person or first person, but you're describing everything that your character did. And it was surprisingly compelling.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
There were definitely, there's definitely moments in all of the campaigns that I think I've played where I basically just be like, yeah, my character's just going to do this. But I know that for Friday Night Frights and Shattered Isles, we were basically not trained, but told basically like, hey, try to stay in character as long as you can. And I definitely wanted to do that for Friday Night Frights, not to break the immersion.
Well, it makes sense to do it for Friday Night Frights, and especially because you're the only player. Like, you have time to just like, if you're interested in something, I feel like if I only had if I had one person at my table, right, and like you're the only person I'm GMing, it makes sense for me to be like, okay, so you want to spend time on this, but then you want to quickly expedient like toss away this scene. That's fine. I will entertain it. But if I think that this toss away scene is important, or I think that this thing that you want to like delve into is not that important, then I'll kind of like temper the pacing. But it makes sense for a horror game to do that in character. I find that this is interesting because instead of seeing like what happens, it's what had happened. So like every RPG is different, and I think every RPG you kind of have to like nail the tone of that game and get the players to buy into whatever that that is. It's really interesting.
It would be cool too. It'd be interesting to see an AP that's the opposite, just 100% in character. Like the stream starts and there's no introduction. There's no, I'm doing this, we're playing this system. It's all narrative. And maybe, you say, okay, roll these dice, roll this, whatever. But there's no meta talk, no nothing. That'll be an interesting.
I think there are.
You could do that with a lot of systems.
There's definitely shows out there that are styled like that, and it can be done. It's just, you'd have to get the right people to do it. I don't think I could do it because I definitely would fudge everything up.
On a live actual play, it would be a little more difficult, I think, for sure. On a podcast, you could totally pull that off. That's not hard. But yeah, no, a live actual play, that would be cool. I was thinking about, especially after the hellacious game that I ran yesterday of D&D, I really want to look into.
Tell everybody.
Oh, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk. I'm still emotionally reeling from it, and I was the game master.
I'm so jealous.
Okay, so teasing it, right? I really want to run a horror RPG, and I've been looking at Cult, Divinity Lost. So it's like. And actually, it's when we were at Gen Con, Max and Cassie found the book for sale, and I couldn't find the book. They were like, "Oh, it's over there in that booth," and I'm like, "Where is it? I want this book." but it's a powered by they powered it by the apocalypse, so it's that kind of system, but it's a horror game, and it is based on like an old RPG. I want to say it was like from the early 90s or something, and it's I was listening to an actual play of it on Red Moon Role Playing. It's this really, really cool. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, Scrim, this would hit those buttons of what you were saying about just totally in character, no introductions. The introduction of the show for the cult series that I read of the Black Madonna was the one I listened to. I listened to it straight through. I was just engrossed. The introduction is literally one of the characters gets a like 1 minute, 2 minute monologue of like the character's mental state, and then we just hop right into the actual play.
Nice.
And
that's cool.
it's so good. I highly recommend that Red Moon Role Playing cult Black Madonna, although they also do a couple of other series of cults. I've had some ideas.
The art
for sure.
For cult is unreal. I'm on the website. Holy crap.
Yeah. And I'm not going to show it on streams. I don't know if it's safe for work, but
right, like it's maybe a little much, but
it's a little graphic.
Wait a
Yeah.
What am I Googling?
Also of note,
this.
Cults, but with a K. Now, Cults has a very real potential of being kind of edgelordy, but if handled properly and with care, and and
respect
with
for the
good
players.
Yeah, and like the book also, despite it having like all of these like crazy edgelordy stuff, and like it even like we'll get into this, but like they have a very like not a lot of RPGs do this, although they're starting to now, but it was one of the first books I've seen that has like a whole section of player safety mechanics and like consent and talking to your players and making sure that everyone is totally cool with it, because like this game will uncomfortably not shy away from like the worst of the worst topics that you could possibly think of, right? So as long as I would know that if I ran this game, I would want to make sure that I am totally respectful of the players, and then push what I am allowed to do as far as I can.
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
So. I think in every single campaign I play, my GM is always like, before we start, because I remember in Rune Lords, when I was doing Pathfinder Rune Lords, the GM there was like, hey, there's going to be, are you guys comfortable with this topic and this topic and this topic and whatever, blah blah blah. And I think everybody was like, we're cool, do it. And they were like, sweet.
And then you found out maybe you're not so cool with it, because that's dark.
I've heard that Rune Lords can get a little intense.
I love dark stuff, so nothing really like skeeves me out. But it's also like I don't know, when there are certain people in the group that are like, oh no, I don't want to be a part of that if that's going to be in the campaign, so they're like, oh okay, let's just cut it. I just kind of get a little sad, because I'm like, yeah, but that's what would have happened, like that's realistic to me, right? So
but at the same time, like like
you
have to respect everybody at the table and make sure that it's fun for everybody. You
want a game that respects everybody's, I guess beliefs is the wrong word, but like
boundaries.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting right now in terms of running a horror RPG. Because it just has a very psychological horror bend to it that I'm really kind of digging. Anyway, but and that game is, to further pitch it, it is, the conceit of the game is that our entire world is an illusion, and we are all leftovers of like divine beings, either like hell or heaven. And cool. So we're all actually like demons or angels in different capacities and strengths, and like, so when you pierce through the illusion, right, like that's when you like start seeing the world for what it actually is, and like all of the crazy conspiracies and like people that are manipulating things to create like mass catastrophes or movements and like political, like everything is, anyway. So yeah, it's a neat game. Neat. But talking about horror things, so yeah, I have to share my D&D story. Okay,
Yeah.
like I've sort of shown I've okay, Scrim and Paige and Trav, who is not here, were privy to what I was going to do, because like at the end of our last Cyberpunk Red session, I told them, guys, I need to like share this right now because I'm dying to tell people what I'm about to.
Sucks when you can't tell anyone.
Right? Yeah, I know. And this was a well-guarded secret that I had kept to myself for a year. That I was leading up to this moment, right? And I got everyone together for this D&D session, and I said this is going to be an all-day session. So we got together at 10 in the morning. Like, people started arriving at 10 in the morning. I had like my Cuban breakfast out, right? Like, I went to a bakery, got like croqueticas and pastelitos and café con leche, and said, all right, let's go. And we started at 11, and we went all the way up to 11 at night with a couple of like half-hour like food breaks in the middle. By the first break, everything was totally fine. They were at a nobles party, and they were like about to get caught after having found a guard that had been incapacitated and whatever. So simple, whatever. By the second break, I had everyone in fucking tears. This was about maybe like 4.5 hours in. So for 8 hours, all of our players and me were in like this emotionally harrowing, distressing like experience. And I've never GM'd for 12 hours straight.
That's crazy. It's insane. Lot.
I also only had 2 hours of sleep because I was like prepping for this game. Yeah. So like I went to bed at 6 in the morning and I started getting woken up by my cats around 8. Because I was obsessed. I was like, I need this to be perfect. I've had this in my head playing for a year. I need this to be exactly what I want. So I was like assembling all of my music playlists. I was getting like, I bought hue lighting, like the smart lights for my dinner table, so that I could like adjust the lighting to fit certain moods.
So good.
Yes, like I went bonkers. And so but I just ran on pure adrenaline for 12 hours. I was like riding this high because like it was just intense. And so let me stop skirting around it. I don't want to give spoilers as to what campaign this belongs to, because I've been following a campaign storyline from D&D, but essentially the party that they went to, the nobles of this villa decided, or not decided, they had a pact with Asmodeus, the devil god, right? Like the Lord of the Nine Hells.
Sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like a great idea, right?
Yeah,
they had a pact.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, Chris, hey, one of my players is in chat. She's just like, it was devastating. Okay, she was crying. She was crying so much. She was like sitting across from me at the other end of the table, and she's like, I can't. They had a pact with Asmodeus, and they had to trade for their financial well-being of their house. Basically, they traded the souls of their children. Okay, so one soul was taken immediately.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do. One of them was already like in the attic, like had been already converted into like this mindless, insane devil that was like chained to the wall, and like he was just kept. It was like the secret that was hidden in the attic that they would visit every day and cry in front of, because they were just like, oh my god. And so they were like, we need to save the souls of our other children. So a clause in the contract. So I had them go. Hold on. So the lead up to this story is they're searching for like this MacGuffin, this thing that to like find all of this. I feel like I'm inherently giving away.
Yeah, you kind of are a little bit. Like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like anyone who knows anything.
Right. Fine. I don't have to do the lead up. Point is, they get to this villa for these nobles that I had set up prior, right? So like they've already met this family, and they think it's just, a fabulous party. Let's go, let's mingle, and then we're gonna do some like stealth infiltration, try and sneak around the villa to find this thing that they're looking for. And what they end up finding is the sun in the attic, the grimoire that like the contract was, you know, like you have to drop blood into the book to like make the pages appear in infernal language, right? And like and like so you have the contract and the ritual and all that, and like so like they found out what was happening, and they found a clause in that contract that said that if they pay basically like they have to pay certain things, and one of those payments is 99 souls. So what they found in the attic was a bunch of like an empty vial case, and earlier while they were traversing, they found in the kitchen like the cook had like shoved a bunch of bottles into the trash, empty bottles, and they found in this vial case like all of these scratched off labels for a poison that would kill everybody, that would kill whoever drank it at midnight. And I was like, when they found that, and like it's a few minutes to midnight, and there's only a couple of antidotes in this vial case, and some of the players had eaten at this feast. Like they weren't thinking that they were going to be poisoned, so they drank all of this antidote. They had like one left over that they killed a cultist. Like a cultist showed up, take this antidote, and then like. Yeah, because I was like, let me give them at least one more antidote. And like I knew that one other player had this thing that they had earned. They were given a charm that they could do restoration on people, so like they could heal a few people of poison. And so they are running down the villa, down the stairs from the attic to get to the front where I even built like a little staircase, like a grand, like double staircase with like with a little like balcony overlooking the place. I built it out of foam core, and like I painted it wood and varnished it and everything. Like it's because I saw this scene so perfectly in my head, and so like these nobles are giving the toast. And midnight starts striking, and then I start describing how like they start coughing, they start grabbing their throats. I start tipping over. Like I had like 40 minis of nobles like awesome. Standing there in the base of the like while the noble like the villains were overlooking the whole scene, and I'm just like tipping them down and I'm like ding like no like it was tragic. And I played it to a song from The Leftovers. I don't know if you ever watched The Leftovers, but the music to that show is fucking heart-wrenching. So while I'm playing that music, I'm tipping people over, I'm going ding ding. The players are trying to rush to their loved ones because three of the 7 players I had were nobles. They had noble backgrounds, so like I had their family members invited to this party, so they had to like rush to see who they could save before the 12 strikes of the midnight clock were up. And an action in D&D is 6 seconds. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have a lot of time, and by the time they had about like 30-45 seconds of panicking of me describing the situation and trying to figure out who they were going to like give this antidote to before I said, and everyone is dead, and I'm going to need all of them tipped down, please, except for those that lived. And so, oh my gosh. So they had to tip down like all of these people that they knew that they met at this party or that were related to them. And then the cultists start appearing from all of the doors, right? They start entering, devils and the guards of the villa start entering and like surrounding it. And like all of these are down. I had like all of these little blood stains, like cut out blood stains. I got like those, you know, like in Halloween stores, like have like those gel hands, those red gel hands that you like stick onto a wall so it looks like a blood drip. So I got that and I cut them into even further tiny little blood stains, and I like placed them everywhere because they were like coughing up blood and vomit and stuff. So like it was basically a scene out of I don't want to give spoilers to that either. Yeah. And
to be fair, they don't know what season.
True. And yeah, so And like literally one of the relatives, one of the noble's fathers is dead in his arms, and the one person that could save him was like this close, like literally he had his piece right next to him, and he was going to try and save him, and he went down, and it just happened that way. Like I didn't even really, like I was just kind of like processing the moment, and I was like, this is the right time, calling it. And yeah. So he's over his father, right? And then a cultist comes in, takes off her mask. It's a tiefling, and she's just like, it feels good to be myself, and looks down at the noble, this human noble, right? And his dead father. And she goes, with our father gone, we can finally be ourselves. Our true father, Asmodeus. Join me, brother. Like reaches out to him, and everybody
God.
was like, what's happening? And that player describes how the illusion rolls off of his father and reveals that it's a tiefling, and then he removes his own ring and shows that he's been a tiefling this entire game. He is glamored. And then he says, like, so after, like, these players are freaking the fuck out because they were like, no fucking way. And then he tells his sister, only one of us is surviving tonight. And I said, roll initiative. And so they had to fight all of these demons and cultists on top of all of the bloody dead bodies, which were difficult
terrain though.
I difficult terrained it. So they had to fight over all of it, and it was just nuts. And then during the fight, one of the cultists stabs another noble, and then she rips off her mask, and it's his mother, saying like, do you know, because she joined the cult for another, like he realized at that moment why she joined that cult, because like in his backstory, he led the house to financial ruin for a good cause, but led the house to financial ruin, and they've been like trying to make up. So like, you know, she was in charge of the accounts, and so now she's like she was also joined the cult to have financial prosperity, to just keep the house afloat. And it's like, you did this to us, this is what you deserve. And then like an arrow shoots through her, kills her, and then like just falls, and it's one of the other players had just done an attack on the mother to save him, and it's like, and it just so happened to be the one that's like in a romantic involvement. It's like these two PCs have been in a romantic involvement, so like one of them saved the other, and it was really cute. But obviously, you know, dead mother, eventually dead sister, the one like the tiefling. And after that whole thing occurs, there was one other noble character. She was like around the back. Like she had gone all the way around the back to like avoid the worst of it, and she could like kind of pew from the back. And so she's in this dining room area alone, and a cultist approaches her like hands surrendered, takes off his mask, and it's her father. And he's crying. And so I'm role playing crying, and the tears ended up becoming like real instantly, because I felt like I was just like bearing this terrible secret to her. And I said, you know, I'm so sorry. This went too far. They have taken this too far. This needs to be stopped. You know, and I'm so proud of you. I've seen what you've done. You can do this. Like, basically just like they had like this very tense but sad revealing daughter-father moment. And he, you know, she's like, can't you help us? And he goes, I can't. If I do, I would be, the fate that I would be doomed to if I did would be worse.
Yeah. So
I can't, but they're you know, points them to the direction, like a hidden door in a hallway that leads down into the crypts below where the ritual is going to take place, and points them there and says, you have some time to rest before, you know, and basically like leading them in, because I already started hearing them talking about just fucking burning the place down. Fuck this place. Like we want everyone dead. They're not going to get these bodies, right? So I told them, you know, you have some time to rest. I suggest that you take it. Only you can stop this. And so she says, she thanks him, and he just like in like it's like it was a goodbye without the word goodbye being said.
Yeah.
And I go, he takes out a dagger and slits his own throat.
Oh God.
Crumples to the ground. Like at that moment, literally I had people literally look away from me as I did it. Like it was just so visceral. And then I had one player who was just like sobbing in tears, like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And like,
how could you do that?
yeah. So I had all of these players, like all of my players were in just a total blood rage / traumatic survivor experience. Like they were ready, but like, so but in the meantime, they had to rest and recuperate after that intense battle in the main hall. So they go into this office right outside of that door. And so they have to do their short rest listening to all of the bodies getting dragged down into the crypt by the cultists.
Oh my
Great.
Yeah. Which I didn't even plan this. It just happened that way. And I was like, oh, this is sick. Oz, what is wrong with you? But I did it. So and then, you know, ensue the giant, crazy, epic fight that went downstairs. You know,
that's so crazy.
Giant mega demon. Of course, you know, one of them decides to like become the avatar of Asmodeus and like became this giant demon. So they had to fight him and all the cultists. They one-shotted the wife, who is actually like a wizard. Like they found her spell book, so that's why they targeted her. And they like natural 20'd her, like just knocked her ass to the ground, like killed her before she even got to go.
Group.
Yeah, very good job,
team.
group. And yeah, it's and then they say it's funny how talking about environment immersion with music is what led us to this moment. Yeah, the music, the music is really actually like after that session ended, which by the way, like when they descended into the crypts, I played music. Just all of the music was Bloodborne.
Yeah,
so I had like the chanting and the action stuff. All of it was Bloodborne.
Yes.
When they were fighting in the main hall, I used the Orlais battle theme from Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yes.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Prior to that, I used the stuff from the leftovers, like when they had like this emotional shock of like, you know, all of these people were dying. They had only this limited time to save. So like, and then while they were in the crypts, I changed all of the lighting to just like this blood red. So like for a few hours, we were just like in this hellfire red color, and and anyway, long story short, after that harrowing experience, which took again 8 hours, mainly also because of all of the battling that took place, they came out of it heroes of the city and were able to I mean, obviously the city is in mourning, and like all of these noble houses have been decimated because of all these nobles happened to either die in this party or were in the cult and were killed by the party. And so now the what's left are picking up the pieces. All of these noble houses that were part of that cult are now, you know, like, contract's done, buddy. Like, so now all of them are starting to like feel the financial strains again. And all of the funds went back to the funds that they had stolen. Well, anyway, again, not going into that. But point is, they saved the city, and they became heroes of the city, and they had like the big, you know, epic, you know, the big fantasy ending where, you know, like the ruler of the city, you know, pins medals of honor on them, and like declares them heroes, and like they had the cheering and the chanting and there was a song even that I had written for them, like they like fucking like maybe 10 sessions ago. They saved some farmers from some shit, right? And the farmers ended up creating a song for them, like about them, and then I had them in the audience sing the song, which then caught on in the audience, and they sang that song back at them at the end.
That's sweet.
So there we go. So that was the story, and there was like obviously like heartfelt epilogues. I don't want to get into it because then it's like too much, but like I just wanted to, that again, I've never GM'd for that long. And like we've had emotional moment, like, you know, we've all, the three of us,
Totally.
we have shared emotional moments playing our tabletop RPGs. But we've done it for like an hour, hour and a half, maybe 3 hours. Maybe like we had that one depressing episode that was just kind of
There's one or two.
But,
you're like, whew.
Yeah, but man, 8 hours of sobbing and rage was what they went through. Like, it was emotionally harrowing. I could barely wake up today to go to work, and like all day at work I've just been thinking about it. And like, I don't know, shit, I did a really good job. And
what else can you think about, right? Like that, it just absorbs you so much.
But I had, like, that's the thing, like this moment has been in my head, like all of that.
Yeah, over a year, right? For a year
I'd been, and all of these things were just perfectly leading into it. And it just, where I was worried though, that I was going to cross some boundaries, or that I was going, because I mean, like, it was dark. It was really dark, and it was totally unexpected, I think, too, because like it's D&D, you know, all of the things that you usually fight are like, you know, hunky dory, like
and
yeah, exactly. They're kind of
fishmen.
Yeah, they're like dopey or silly,
they're
and
whimsy.
every once in a while, they're whimsy, exactly. And then so when you go down a route like this, it's like, holy, like they just did not expect. And like we've barely touched on things that have been that dark. So, but yeah, he was amazing. Machiavellian.
Machiavellian, yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, we haven't seen you at that level, but it sounds about right for the energy that you bring to our games as well. But I have a question for you both.
Yeah.
Based on that description, why do you play RPGs?
Man, it's been a while since I've actually. Well, that's not true. I'm playing RPGs right now. I'm playing Cyberpunk Red. It's a big question. I play them because they are fun, fucking fun, period. And they hit us, they scratch an itch that you don't get from video games, where it's just coded, hard lined, you know, options, like it's either this or this or that, and then, you know, and then generally it just kind of weaves into the same thing, right? I think, and it's, you know, it's mainly a lot of like kill, take stuff, get a little bit of snippet of story, cool, whatever. And sometimes some video games are better at it than others, right? They're more immersive in the story, right? So like, you know, BioWare, I think is a good example of a company.
Speaking of Dragon Age and Mass Effect.
Dragon Age, Mass Effect, exactly. Like they really showed that process, but even then, it's not necessarily the same when it's a single player experience versus like all of these players chipping in together to create the story.
Yeah.
And it's like every story is going to be so different and so personal to a group, and it's a shared experience, because like my playthrough of a narrative RPG, like my playthrough of Mass Effect is not the same as your playthrough of Mass Effect. No. And so like we could talk and like, oh my God, this happened. But like, it's not going to have the same emotional impact that it had to us alone, but like in a group.
And at the end of the day, it's the same story. It might end differently with characters.
Minor differences,
Yeah, there's going to be little differences, but at the end of the day, you're playing the same story. That's usually railroaded. So. Yeah.
So. But yeah, no, great question. I love that. And also, I come from a board game world as well. Like I started board gaming. Well, not start. I mean, I was doing video games too, but board gaming is where like, and this entire group actually that I played with yesterday, all of us started really from board gaming. And board gaming doesn't scratch that narrative itch either. And even narrative board games that
they don't quite get there.
They don't quite get there either, right? There's just something about a free form, super like collective narrative that just has a certain something that is just unmatched by any other medium.
Paige?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't really get into RPGs until much later in my lifespan, I think, like 20, 21. I'm 23 now, so maybe 19 or
relatively
so.
Late.
Yeah, well, yeah, but like I always, I always heard of it and I saw it on TV and like all that fun stuff, and I've always wanted to play it. And then the time I did get to play it when I was like 13 or something, I was camping with my cousins and we played like a really bad D&D session of like we had a sketch I had to grab my sketchbook, and the two people that were running it was like, all right, let me draw a map, you guys create your characters. And so they created like our stats and stuff, and then we had to run through it. And I was the only one that was like invested, and then the other three were like, we just don't want to play today. And I was like, but I want to. And
that
then
sucks.
and then when I had one of my closest friends, she contacted me and was like, hey, I have another person who's looking for a person to play with, but it's going to be all online. That's when I got into Pathfinder. And I fell in love with it, mainly just because I got to be a part of a story and play a character that a lot of video games aren't going to allow me to play or anything of that nature. And this is like all the characters that I create have some sort of connection to me, and because I make them and I give them backstories, and I like doing that, and I like seeing where their life goes, even if it's going to be horrible at the end. Like,
yeah.
But I mean, that's pretty much why I do it. Plus, like I said, it's fun, and I get to have friends that actually like me near them to play with them. So
actually, something that you said just triggered something else in me. Like that you can have a horrible ending. There's no save button in a tabletop RPG. Like, you might be able to just like slightly retcon something if it was like something really, really shitty that happened at the table. But like generally though, like what happens, and you have to live with those consequences. And you don't really get like, you usually get like a game over screen, or you go back to a save point to like undo that thing that you didn't realize would affect you like 20 hours down the line. I love that it is a game of actions and consequences, and it's finding out where you end up.
For me, it's hard to deal with that, mainly because of my circumstances that happened with like, oh, you can't retcon that, was stuff that I didn't either choose or I did, and I was like, no, I can't do this, let's go back. And the GM was just basically like, nope, too late. So I couldn't do anything about it, and then that just happens. And I feel like the thing is with me, if you guys ever hear me talk about RPGs, I usually have bad experiences all the time, except on Twitch and stuff. All the experiences that I've had here are good. Out of online and live stuff, most of the experiences that I've had either were terrible, and which resulted in my RPG anxiety, I call it, which basically I've gotten better with that, especially on Twitch and stuff, but still in other campaigns I'm not good at it. And the people that I play with, I swear they just consider me as baggage, because there are times where I just don't talk, or I don't want to do something that my character would totally do, because I feel like the other players are going to yell at me for it, because that had happened to me in my first Pathfinder game. And it wasn't in character. The people that were doing it out of character. And so it made me feel just horrible. So I kind of stayed away from, interacting and playing with the group, which made me feel like an NPC at the end of the day that was just a follower. But, and then like games that were good, like Rune Lords, that Pathfinder campaign that as you were in, we played that for like 6 sessions, and then the GM kind of had a mental state breakdown where they just didn't want to run it.
Yeah.
And it was going so fucking well. I was having a lot of fun. I think everybody was, except that GM. Like it's just all of like the outside. So then
what kept you coming back then, Paige, with all these bad experiences?
Because I have endless amount of hope that I actually just want to play a campaign that's going to end up being good. Yeah.
Well, you know what? Like, I think, it's true. Having a good group, and having a group that buys in, having a group that also communicates, right? And like, make sure that everybody's like on the same page, or talks about like we don't have to go into the specifics, right? But like when you said something in particular struck me, the part where you said that you felt like an NPC, that you couldn't really be what your character was going to do. It seems to me like that was a disconnect between the character that you created for this campaign versus what the campaign was created for. Mm-hmm. Or like what these characters were about, and like so that like having that feeling of like being an outsider is. Anyway, I wasn't part of that campaign, so I can't attribute where blame lies, but
I blame the people.
Either way, either way, like, you know,
it's also like the majority of campaigns that I've played in. I'm playing with like dice in my hands, fidgeting. But the majority of campaigns that I played in, out of online, you know, alive stuff. All of the people that created their characters are either they're very like fidgety, they're very like particular, and they all have their own thing and they go their own way, which is fine. It's just when you're in a team with people, you have to realize that you're going to be in a team with those people and you have to work with them. If you don't work with them, why the fuck are you in that team?
So this is actually something that I did with my D&D group. I made sure that I said, listen, first thing, like out of the gate, one of the first things that you should always be mindful, and I do this with Shadowrun, anything cyber, like any really RPG where it's group dynamic based, which is basically I can almost all of them except for Paranoia, but even Paranoia to some extent, right? And Fiasco to some extent. If you are a hindrance, like if you're being an asshole, first off, like, okay, if the character is being an asshole, then you are hindering other people's fun as a player. Like on a meta level, you are probably hindering someone else's fun because you're having fun at someone else's expense rather than having fun with people. So that's on that level. In the game level, you are ruining your reputation amongst this group and then making it so why do we want to even have this person in our party? It doesn't make narrative sense for us to have this person here. So and run, and then it creates disruption and it makes it harder for me to run this game and for us to enjoy it and be on like move forward. And especially for me in this campaign that I was running, it was important because it was a drop in drop out game, whereas like one shots, but like with an overarching plot, but like each session was its own mini thing, like it gets resolved in a single sitting. But yeah, like that's why it's like this needs to be stated every time. You have to think of your character's reputation in the group, and if you become troublesome, then you basically ruin it for yourself and for everyone else. There has to be a certain buy-in. Like you can have drama and you can have disagreements and you can have discussion and debates, but the moment that you start getting into like confrontation, like where it's not going to be conducive to good drama, or where the good drama becomes a hindrance to the plot moving forward. Yeah. Right? And your capability of working together, then it becomes a problem.
If your character, if you do something where you, for example, yell at another character for them doing something, and then telling them basically like, why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that. And then, you know, have the other person not end up doing anything. Basically the situation I was in. That's not, even as an, like, oh, that's what my character would have do. I don't care. I couldn't do anything in that session because of what happened between the characters. Like, it wasn't, even when my character ended up talking to other people, just to give ideas or whatever, I had another player that straight up was like, their character was like, I don't trust you, and didn't listen to anything I said. And I was like, all right, well, I can't give suggestions in this dungeon. Thanks. Like, I guess I'll just stand here in a corner. If you need fucking spells, I'm here. But that's another thing where like the D&D campaign I'm in, granted, the two people that I, because we got two new people, the two people that I played with, they understand that I go through shit and for like RPG anxiety and everything like that. And I think I don't,
which is a very real thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody,
RPG anxiety.
Have you never experienced RPG anxiety?
Describe it.
For
Like,
me,
stressed about a
I
game.
was gonna say it might be different between.
it might be different for
yeah.
people. I think everybody experiences different levels of RPG anxiety. For me, it is my RPG anxiety is all about, am I doing, like, I'm not doing enough, or I'm missing things. RPGs in particular highlight for me a lot of flaws that I have with like listening. Sometimes I don't listen. So I have to take like all of these copious notes, and then they're all over the place, and then I can't respond properly, and I don't feel like I'm in the moment, and I feel like I'm failing my players. And then if I don't have like a certain if I don't have certain things ready, then I didn't take the effort. Sometimes I find myself like,
Is that just regular life anxiety? Like, I just feel that about everything.
well, sure, yeah.
Yeah, but
like, it just sometimes applies to RPGs.
But like, this is supposed to be a game. It's supposed to be fun. Why do I have anxiety for the game? Right?
Yeah.
But I know that a lot of other mine is like a very minor form of it. I think a lot of other people have.
Mine's pretty minor.
Right, like other people, and from what I'm gathering, I don't want to speak for you, Paige, but like it reminds me of like things I've seen anecdotally of, you know, anxieties of, you know, clashing personalities at a table, anxieties of how do I get everybody to get along, anxieties of this person is crossing my boundaries, or am I going to offend someone? Sometimes even getting to a point of like, am I a bad person? Am I the problem? There are even issues of like of gaslighting, right? Where like it makes you feel like you're the bad person, but really, like, I mean, you know, it like things go down, and finding the right group is first and foremost the most important thing. But even when you're dealing with random people, I think it can't just be a group dynamic. I think it has to be it's up to every individual to keep each other in check, and policed isn't the word, because it's not that. It's just keeping each other respectful, and just do checkups and reminders of what the social contract is, to make sure that this game functions and is fun for everybody.
Fun for all.
Yeah, it's also like pretty much you nailed it. I mean, the reason why my anxiety for my RPG anxiety spiked was that my very first campaign, where I felt like as a player, I couldn't play. I was an NPC just following people around, and I had to sling spells whenever we got into combat. There were, towards the end, I wasn't really like role playing that much and whatever. There were multiple times where multiple characters cut my character off during speaking to correct her.
No.
Yeah. So, and then on top of that, when I did talk to the GM about this shit, they ended up pointing the finger at me. So they were basically like, well, you were kind of to blame too. And I was like, I don't understand how. And then they would try lighting that scenario up. And they kept doing that. They never saw my side of the story, my side and everything, and how I felt. So like it sucked. And so whenever I got into any confrontation, I just stepped back, because I knew that I was going to be yelled at by the GM if I brought it up, or the other characters were just going to shut me down. And it's happened. And like I said, it's thankfully on like the group on Join the Anarchy, like you guys and Chattercast, like all of the people that I played with currently don't do that, and I have gotten better with my RPG anxiety. But outside of Twitch, it's just still the same. It's bad. And what's worse is, like I said, I think, like, I know the GM of my group, I think the GM of my group thinks that my anxiety is just baggage, where they're like, you should be over this by now. Why aren't you?
Which then gives you more anxiety. Because you're like, oh my God, like I am literally weighing everyone down. And the more that I think about it, and the more that I call attention to my problem, that I am legitimately having a problem, the more that I'm seen as the problem. And it's like, no, how about we address my problem so that we can move forward, right? Because again, not everything has to be on you. You know, again,
like if I do something that is my fault, I will own up to it.
Of course.
But the majority of the time when like, for example, in that 5e campaign, my character, we got into this. Okay, someone needed to be arrested because they accidentally murdered someone, and she decided to stand up, and was like, they're with me because I'm a paladin. I need them for work or whatever, and I failed it. I failed the persuasion, and the barbarian of our group decided to go. I don't know exactly what he said, but he wanted to shut her up, and the only thing he could think of was to backhand her. And I was like, and out of character, I was shocked because I was like, why okay, all right,
that's terrible.
What do I have to roll to dodge this shit? And then thankfully one of the other players was also with me that was just like, what the fuck, man? And he decided to, in the moment of like let's shut her up type of thing, was going to put his hand over her mouth to shut her up, which I was fine with because I was putting a foot up my ass so far because I failed that persuasion, so I just kept digging a hole for my team. But he ended up stopping the barbarian and like stopping him from hitting her, and then immediately went, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck, insert character? Like, why did you do that? And then on top of it, the other character who was in trouble, when like that character and my character never really got along, but they worked with each other, knowing that they had to get, they were a team. There were multiple times where she apologized to him, and he basically just, like, I think the exact words were, I'm sorry that I have been a bit of a bitch lately. And he basically went, yeah, you have been, and didn't like accept the apology. So I already was like, all right, well, fuck you. Like, why would I just be like, oh, that's normal? Like, so that sent the whole thing into a spiral. And then the GM ended up blaming me for most of it.
Yeah, I think, well, first off, ew, and then not your fault. I mean, I understand that, yeah, you were digging the team into a hole. If somebody wanted to like kind of like interrupt and try and save the situation, that's fine. But like backhanding you is not saving the fucking situation.
Exactly.
And it's disrespectful and it's gross.
Yeah, exactly.
GM should have stepped in. Second, I think that where was I going with this? What was there was an ending to this. Well, this is why I don't do lists.
But yeah, like it's like I was all for the other character to put a hand over her mouth, because to me that's funny. Like, and those two characters were going on and off with flirtatiousnesses and stuff, so like it worked.
Oh, now I remember the apology part. When I like to think of things as when a character approaches, for good conflict resolution to occur in an RPG, right? If two characters are butting heads, and one decides to come forward and say, hey, I'm sorry. If the other person keeps up the conflict, then it ruins the good, like it actually makes the conflict even worse, right? Because it ruins that good faith, and you could have had a moment of some kind of connection. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's all water under the bridge. Like, I accept your apology. Yeah, exactly. Because like I could accept your apology, but I know that I still don't fully like or trust you, but I appreciate that you came to apologize to me. Thank you for the apology. I accept. Let's move on. Right. That's
and at the end of the day, as a player, your job is to keep the story and the game going. So if you don't do that because you decide, no, my character hasn't, like, this should maybe happen once per campaign, that two characters have irreversible fights. If that's what's happening, then you need to play a different character. Like, it's just not, unless the whole point of the game is to fight with each other. I can see that happening too.
Exactly.
But
like if it was
you have
Paranoia.
Paranoia,
fine, whatever. Or Fiasco.
Paranoia.
Fiasco. It's meant to. Fiasco is meant to have conflict, but when D&D is not that.
Yeah,
it's not that.
Unless,
neither is Shadowrun, and
unless you have, say, a D&D campaign where it's like, all right, you guys are all natural evil or whatever.
Not even.
You know,
I would still tell the natural evil that any evil characters that are, if it's an evil campaign, you are still working together. You have to work together to fend off all of the good guys that think they're being good by taking over your shit. Excuse me. I have a kingdom to rule or take over. Who the fuck is you? Who the fuck is you? So like, you still have to work together. And even if it's like a tenuous alliance, like evil people need a network to perpetrate their evil. They don't work in a vacuum.
Yeah. You can't be evil all by yourself.
Yeah, you could be the king of the you could be the king of the heap of the evil, right? But you still have a bunch of minions. You have people on your left and right hand side,
and people you love too. Like people make the mistake of making evil characters like this hate-filled monster who can't do anything other than hate. But I think that evil characters are far more interesting when they.
There's definitely they're only evil because of their actions. If you play an evil person, you don't think you're evil. Like unless you're playing that type of character who's just, you know that you're evil and you don't give two shits.
Which is also a thing.
Yeah,
sociopaths are out there.
Yeah, right? Exactly. But the majority of villains are usually like, their idea of what they're doing is good. Like destroying mankind. They're like, I'm doing it for a reason. Yeah. But you're destroying mankind, so you're evil type of thing. You know, like that's, I like villains like that because there's more of a depth to them.
Every character needs to have depth. That includes like you're not automatically deep just because you're a good character. Like, oh, I'm doing all of the good things. Like that doesn't make you deep, but that doesn't make you. That doesn't mean that you don't have potential to be deep or deeper than a villain. I think we have a lot of problems in media right now where like the villain is super compelling, but the hero is just kind of like, oh, la-di-da, I'm finding my way, being an idiot. Totally. Like
a lawful good paladin is just as irritating as a shallow villain. Yeah, and I shouldn't say not all lawful good paladins, but like that stereotype, like let us fight for the good of the realm, and you're like, oh god, shut up! Stop trying to convert another damn orc.
It's funny. It just, you know, if we ever play D&D together, I won't play lawful good because I usually play a paladin.
No, I love a good lawful good character. I want to hear them struggle with their goodness and their. And there's so many great things that can happen, but there's this stereotype out there of lawful good characters who just can't. I don't know. Can't have any depth.
I always, whenever because I've played an Inquisitor and a Paladin with the Oath of the Inquisitor twice now, and both were neutral, just neutral. And I think one of them was more neutral good. My D&D character, my paladin, she was more neutral good. But I chose that because there's definitely times in an Inquisition where you're fucking hunting down Lamashtu, the goddess of monsters. You're definitely going to be killing some kids with diseases. Like that's gonna happen. You're definitely going to be killing innocents that are like, please help me. And you're like, I can't. You're a fucking vampire.
Right. And so like that's that paladin for that campaign. But in regards to that lawful good paladin, which is what you would typically think of a paladin, right?
Oh yeah.
That I think some of that stereotype comes from people mismanaging what lawful good, just the alignment system in general gets mismanaged because I think there's this weird idea that when you pick that alignment, it is hard coded into your DNA, and the minute that you step outside of those bounds, oh, change your alignment, you're an asshole now. It's like I struggled a lot with this decision, and I made it because I had to, and especially when there's like catch-22s, you know, where there's no good decision, what do you do? That's really interesting, but it doesn't make you less of a lawful good person. It just means that you got stuck in a situation where you had to make a hard choice and you made it, but you know, you're going to deal with the regret and the loss and whatever occurred out of it. I think alignment is such a weird thing for me. I understand why it's in D&D in the sense to like kind of keep people from being murder hobos and like have a certain particularly people
moral
who choose
code.
good, to have that strong upstanding moral code to be heroes for the campaign. And then if you're playing evil characters, to be the evil assholes of the campaign, but like organized evil, right? But it has to maintain a certain level of humanity and flexibility, and that
because no one is 100% good, no one's evil, and if you're able to see the grid as a guideline, I think that's the best way to play, because then you're like, okay, most of the time, 90% of the time, I'm gonna pick lawful good stuff. But this one time, because of these compelling character reasons, this guy, killed my wife. This guy, he did this. Like, you do the thing opposite of who you really are, and there are consequences to that. If you're a cleric of a lawful good god, you might lose some power. You might, and so it has that kind of sense to it, and it also it helps kind of simplify the world so that you feel like I am fighting against evil and they are evil, and just like capital E, I feel good about that. So you can get that sense of like, yeah, I got that bad guy. Even though because that doesn't really exist in real life. So
I always think that like lawful good paladins, for example, my like all the time when I think my cliche in my head is, I have done it. I have slayed the orc, and then there are multiple other people that are like, "Yeah, but you burned down my house." Like, I killed the orc. Like that in my head, that's a lawful good paladin.
But the orc.
Like, I did what I came here for. I'm done. I'm going home. Like,
right. Yeah, or you also have, and also it's a village of orcs that are like, you burned down our house.
What do we do to you?
Exactly. Like you came in here. Like you suck. But I love playing paladin.
And playing a lawful good character in a group full of chaotic neutral can be really irritating to both sides of that equation. So again,
it's
that's
tough
also
to make that interesting.
It's tough to make it. It's tough to make it work.
Yeah,
you can make it work, but I think people need to buy into it and maybe see. Like if I had that dynamic going on, actually, you know what? I had this dynamic going on. I played a Pathfinder game where I was playing neutral. Like everybody was playing some kind of neutral, and we had the one character that was like lawful good, and she was just this super paragon of all this shit. And we made her the queen because hey, you're a pretty upstanding lady. Let's make you the queen of this town that we're building. And it that same conflict happened where we were just being really irritating to her, and she was being really irritating to us. And eventually I turned that on its head, and I said, like, listen, I'm learning a lot from you, and thank you for making me a better person, and I'm sorry that I'm being frustrating.
That's a good way to bring it. I like that.
It's like bettering myself. And actually, bringing this back to the D&D game I had last night, a lot of my players are also playing neutral characters, and after this whole thing happened, like, they came together and they bonded, and they like characters transformed. Like, they shed their noble homes that they were like experiencing all this bitchery through, and like, and so even like, we have a drow rogue who's playing chaotic neutral. Even she like showed like these new colors of her personality. Everyone's like, oh my god, you're like actually like super compassionate, and you've gone through a lot of shit, and and you're here to change things and change yourself. And so it was that's why like, alignment is not just a quick selection and you're done. It's
totally. I totally agree.
It's a way to like have an arc and think about your position in this party and how you all come together to become heroes, or become legends rather, right? So
it's also keep in mind, don't play into your alignment. My D&D 5e campaign with the barbarian who slapped or tried slapping me, there are two people
still
in
fuck
that campaign.
Guy. He was playing evil, right?
No, he's chaotic.
chaotic stupid. Got it.
Chaotic. And that's the thing. There were two people. The fighter and me were neutral good, and the other characters were either chaotic good or just chaotic or neutral chaotic or whatever. And I think like two of the other players were doing it well. They had their moments where they were like, no, we have to band together to stop this, whatever. But the other two, the bard and the barbarian, were just, they were rivaling evil so bad. There was a time where we found this lady in a swamp, and we're hunting these witches, and so we decided, all right, let's check on her to make sure if she's a witch, you know, whatever, deal with her. And she wasn't. I made all of the checks. I did what I could. She had no magical energy. Her eyes were ripped out of her face, so they were
good. Yum.
Yeah, she had a bunch of diseases because she's been there forever. So I healed her, and I was like, I don't care what we do, I'm bringing her back to the cart. And I think, like, yeah, the barbarian and the bard were just like, why? Just get rid of her. And I was like, I'm sorry, she's injured, and she's been here, and she's terrified, and she's hearing voices. I'm going to pick her up, bring her back to the cart. And I forgot the exact question was basically like, what do we get out of this? And it's like, do you want me to pay you? Like, so it was just, it was one of those moments where, like, and of course, those two characters, basically, the barbarian was like, why is she such a goody two-shoes when I wasn't in the area? When my character wasn't in the area.
Why are y'all such assholes? Like, hello?
And like, the bard was just basically like, I don't know. And I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I was like, you guys are playing evil, right? Like, I don't.
Yeah, like, again, this is just a misalignment of understanding of what this group dynamic is going to be, right?
Yeah. But like, again, the GM didn't step in. Like, if you really want to play to your alignment, that should have automatically stepped in and been like, all right, that you're rivaling evil. At least in my opinion, you are. Like, yeah. I don't know what it was, but whatever. So, the campaign's ended, and if we play with those people,
I mean, sometimes it's not also just a GM thing. I think, sometimes it, especially I know this from GMing, where I've had times where I'm like kind of in my own head, and like a conflict is going on, and I'm just kind of tuning it out because I'm thinking about the next thing that I'm going to do. Because I'm just like, oh, this is playful character banter, whatever. It's really, again, this is really bad Oz stuff. So I have to be a more active listener. But the thing is, like, there's so many things going on, and you're like machinating, and so. But anyway.
So we didn't go off topic, but we stayed on RPGs. But we did stray away from the original question. I did get a chance to answer, which was like 45 minutes ago.
Why do you play RPGs?
Why we play RPGs? Yeah. So I think. So I've always loved magic in stories. And I've always, I was thinking about it, and I think the reason is, at base level, I always feel like there's some truth behind the universe that is hidden and that I can find. So any story I love has that element in it, like Harry Potter or even Marvel to some extent has that, even though they get out there, but they're like secret and they're hiding. We don't really 100% know where all the powers come from. They try to explain it, but really. So those kinds of things, I've always loved superpowers and magic and all of that. And I grew up in an environment where RPGs were considered very like devil worship kind of thing.
Ooh, Satanic Panic.
Yeah, for real. And so I was never, ever part of them. And I even the stories about magic, I wasn't allowed to. So I would find ways to sneakily do that kind of thing. But anyway, I love the idea that I can exist in a world where those secrets are real and I can play around with them. And then I get to make stories with a whole bunch of people. Yeah. I just love stories. I love them so much. I want to the best part of any RPG for me is when something really horrible and tragic happens to my character.
Yeah.
Because it's serving the story. And of course you can't have that every session or it would just be
Yeah, no, you have to earn those moments for sure. And those moments have to be few and far between for them to really have an impact. If it happened every session, it doesn't have that impact. And that's a lot on a GM and a table to have to keep dealing with that shit every week.
And it would just get to be soap opera-y, right? Like, I'm your twin brother's favorite.
Yes.
Like,
Gasp!
Oh my gosh! But although I would play a soap opera RPG.
That would be so fun.
There is a telenovela.
We talked about the telenovela one, yeah.
The Spanish telenovela RPG. It's actually, I believe, it might be going on Kickstarter soon. Like they have an a trimmed down version of it. But yeah, it's called Pasión de las Pasiones. So does
that mean Passion of the Passion?
Yes. Passion of the Passions. So
what else would you call it?
Right? So yeah, I've actually really always wanted to play that and like, but like because it's specifically telenovela, like I want to make sure I have a cast that really grew up with telenovelas. Like I grew up with telenovelas. I would never
be able to do that.
Because you would have like the SNL version of telenovela, right? Where it's just like,
or not even that. I would just be like drama.
Yeah. But
anyway, I love just making stories with people, and I love finding that hidden element of the universe. Even like my career's in science education. That's the reason I went into science education, because I got to explain the secrets of the universe to people. Like that blew my mind that I could do that. Just the idea of it. So yeah, it's like the answer to the question of my soul. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, but honestly, like my whole life I've been trying to fit like board games and video games into this RPG shaped hole, and it never worked. Gasp and telenovela. Anyway.
Wait, do you all know how to gasp in telenovela?
I do not.
Okay. So usually it's something like this.
That's so
true. Oh my goodness.
Well, I have a question. Speaking of tragic characters, how do you guys deal with tragedy in characters? Either like something you didn't plan for type of thing.
Like
either like a death of a character or in character whatevers. I'm curious because
when you mean deal with it, are you talking about how do you make your story tragic, or are you talking about how we deal with it emotionally, or
deal with it emotionally? Like you yourself. Let's say, I don't know, you're playing a druid and you're playing a ranger and your animal companion dies.
So
spontaneously, like, because the reason I ask is because if anybody has ever played with me in RPGs, I am horrible with dealing with character deaths and tragedy in general. And I think I like to praise myself that I've gotten better. But in certain things, I usually either find it very unfair or I just kind of stay quiet about it. But I've recently learned how to it's like having bad rolls. I've recently learned how to turn it on its head and use it to develop my character even more. And obviously that's the obvious. You should be doing that. But for example, my Inquisitor, who trained his entire life to fight monsters, through the entire fight of fighting skeletons, fucking missed every single hit.
Oh, that sucks. That sucks so much.
So instead of and of course, stuff like that, if you do end up making a character that's like that, I highly suggest trying to work it into your character. Basically, at the end of the day, I just basically wrapped it up as this is his first time being alone. He's usually worked with partners, and the current team members are doing their own thing, and they aren't, best friends, whereas his partner was his mentor. So they bounced off of each other and they knew how each other worked. This is his first time fighting essentially alone in his head. So
Well,
there were
so,
multiple
yeah,
times like that. But like,
You go
you're
first,
gonna have
Tim.
2 questions here. You're asking, how does your character deal with setbacks and failure versus tragedy?
Sure.
Because I think
But I think also like how you as a player manage that, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you
Yeah,
make
so I
know
think
you as a person.
the biggest thing to do is always to respect the character you made. If your character is an insecure and very like petulant kind of person, then they're going to be talking about dull blades and like beefy skeletons and how the sun was in my eyes, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
so you respect whatever they've got going on. And if you, the other thing too, and I believe in this as a GM too, that if your animal companion dies, that you respect the bond that was there. You don't, and
gloss
how
over
your
it, yeah.
character, don't gloss over it, don't be like, whatever, I'll get another one. But like, that is key. And also the GM needs to be aware that it's going to affect you and also allow it to happen. Don't pull back because death is possible. Allow it to happen because it's built into the universe.
I'm gonna preface this one building off of this because it's very topical for me. My husband is playing a ranger in my D&D game, and both he and every other player have fallen in love with his wolf. Okay. And I have been told, if that wolf dies, the table gets flipped and it's over. The campaign ends.
Yeah, no, nobody likes animals death.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I did my usual DM thing of like, well, you know, if it happens, it happens. No, like they fought me hard enough where I picked up on like, okay, maybe this is a line I shouldn't cross. And like in the same sense
Yeah.
of like, you know, the X card or like lines and boundaries that people set. If everyone feels this strongly, like I was able to kill off your family members and it went great. But like if I kill off this, yeah, it went great. But if I kill off this wolf, like it's going to have consequences for fun at the table, especially because like for my husband, it's so close. This, you know, we also just got a new dog and he looks like a wolf, and like so it's like it would hit home, and like replacing this wolf with a new one would just not be the same. So yeah, so I have to, as a GM, find ways to keep the wolf safe, and it's really awkward sometimes for me, but I always try and find a way to justify it. And to loop this back into your question, I just wanted to bring this up because I find that it's an interesting topic of like, you know, what is and isn't off limits, because I know that there's like there's an idea in the RPG community that nothing should be safe, nothing is sacred, but I mean there has to be some things every once in a while to keep the fun at the table. And it's the same thing with like when it comes to lines and boundaries, you have to keep those things. And with a ranger in particular that chose the Beastmaster class, which always gets like ragged on for being super weak, if I take away your wolf, I'm basically taking away your shtick, the only thing that makes you you. So no, I get it. I won't do it, but I'll kill everything else. That's fine. I'll kill your characters. I'll kill your families, whatever. Fuck everything.
But you should never say that, Oz. You need to keep them in doubt. You've let the cat out of the bag. The wolf out of the bag.
I'm also listen, I kept that I'm going to murder their entire families for a year. I think I'm fine if I show a little bit of transparency on this one issue. Right?
Fair enough.
But
that's the other thing is that you got to be able to break those rules. It's okay sometimes to break those rules.
Yeah, and to be transparent and give a peek behind the curtain, just so like they're aware of like, why did I make this decision? Like it's okay to do that. But to loop this back around to your question, it's that ties in because it's part of how do you use the gameplay that's at the table in sense of like, where is this wolf positioned, what is being rolled, what is like all that stuff to justify a story that you want to tell. So like what Scrim said, if you are not hitting these skeletons, oh, my blade is dull, or maybe it's just like, you know, your Inquisitor begins to doubt their abilities to do it, right? And so you come up with a justification for it, and that alone becomes a character thing, and it becomes character development. Always thinking at that higher level. It's not just like, oh, I missed, fuck, move on, but like taking that and giving it some added meat to the skeleton, so to speak.
Yeah, to me, fucking literally all my rolls. I don't know if you remember this because we were in a crypt. Every single time, like, Zincher was fine, Bros was fine, Pescadito was fucking suplexing fucking skeletons, and then Fairfax was over there like trying to get his sword out of a pillar because he missed a skeleton.
You know, just yesterday, I mean, everyone always rags on my husband because he rolls like shit. He cannot hit anything, and he gets like multiple attacks, and like maybe he'll land one or two, but like everyone always ends up ragging on him, like his dice are cursed. And last night, I told you guys the story over Discord chat, but like last night he did this ability like Hail of Thorns to like try and take down 3 people that were adjacent to his target with like spikes and shit that come out of his arrow. And I had to do dexterity saving throws. I rolled natural 20 on all 3 of them back to back. I felt
crazy.
Awful. Like I had people confirm it behind my screen. Like I wouldn't fuck around like that because I don't like to fudge rolls. I used to fudge rolls. I don't fudge rolls anymore.
I avoid it unless I have very early characters and I really fucked up the VR.
Very early characters. Yeah,
while
if they
like just start playing, I'm like, you're fun.
I agree. When you're starting a game and you're getting used to the mechanics and like what the balancing of those numbers are, it's probably okay to start fudging the rolls until you get the hang of it and you understand what that interplay is and can kind of start guesstimating a little better to make sure that the situation is as deadly or as not deadly as you want it to be. Yeah. But I'm sorry, I cut you off, Paige.
No, I think it's good in certain situations to fudge rolls. There have been multiple times in many games where either the thing that we were fighting was either leveled wrong or something. Like when we ended up like in my D&D 5e campaign, when we ended up fighting the witches, they were I ended up getting to my game late. And when I got there, they were like, oh yeah, you took 43 damage, you're down. And I was like, I have 22 health, what the fuck?
Oh,
and
shit.
And thankfully I was alive, I lived through it. But like, I didn't get a single hit in during that entire fight because there were multiple times where, one, my rolls were under their AC or whatever. And then these witches were doing over 40 damage. And all of us were like, well, okay, all right, what do we do here? And
run,
and
run.
It's kind of hard when half of your players are down, though, and I guess I guess we should have talked about that. But I'm happy someone spoke up and was like, "Hey, I think you leveled these witches wrong because these hurt." And I get it when you shouldn't fudge your rolls. Like, you ended up going against a coven of witches. The obvious should be they're difficult. But when it's constantly for example, I didn't get a hit in. I went down immediately. And the GM knew I only had 22 health. And all of the other people had about, I think, 30 or something, or over 30. That one hit, that one roll, which going back in the chat was not natural 20s or anything. That shouldn't have happened. Yeah. And at least in my opinion, but
Yeah, game balancing is a hard thing, but I also think that in situations, right? I heard this on Arcology podcast, and I think it's actually Mr. Johnson that says this, and it's something that's always stuck with me. And it is not your job as a GM to worry about how players are going to get out of something. They will figure it out. They will figure it out. Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you say to the players, hey, listen, you're going to walk into a coven of witch, you see a coven of witch. I don't know if you stumbled on them. You didn't just go in blind, right? And oh shit, witches. Yeah. Okay. You are hunting witches. You got yourself into that situation. And now you saw the witches and you're like, oh shit, it's okay to run. Right. And then have to try and maybe rescue who you left behind or whatever. it is not your job as a GM to worry about. And you know what? If somebody dies as a result, like that's part of the story. It's part of the thing.
Yeah.
You came into something that was too high level, because like at the end of the day, you don't complain when, you know, you're playing Fallout or something like that and you walk into a level that is way higher level than you could possibly take and you die because you get to reload. That's cool. But like, it's part of the world. Like there are things that are just inherently going to kick your ass. And so maybe you should run. There's no shame in running to survive.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, I feel like that's something that we should have mentioned, but I don't know what happened. I wasn't in the mood for that campaign in general. But and plus coming
that would probably put a damper on things.
Well, plus coming in late and being already down, I was like, then why the fuck am I here? And when I was making my Constitution saves, I was like, guys, if I'm dead, I'm leaving. I don't care. Like I'm done.
And that's like, your prerogative. You're perfectly fair to say that, right? Like, again, you invested all this time in the character, and if this is going to keep being a pattern for you that especially that you're experiencing, right? Because a lot of experience around a table can be subjective. So if you're experiencing that, it's totally a prerogative to be like, I don't feel like I'm going to have fun if I come in with a new character, because it's just going to be more of the same.
I don't know. It's one of those things too, where like, I think I've learned from my first Pathfinder campaign where if, my character dies and they come in the middle of a story, like a new one comes into the middle of a story, it's not going to work. Yeah. It's just not going to work. I should just leave the campaign, sadly. But like, I have yet to find a campaign where like, thankfully all my characters have either died, come back to life, or are living. But like, I have yet to find like a balance of, okay, my character has died. I want to continue playing. I'm going to bring in a new character. And the one game that, like I said, my first Pathfinder campaign that ended up happening twice, and ended up playing the last character that I ended up playing, the other players knew, but that whole campaign was fucking messy pudding.
Well, you know what? That's
like,
again.
That's the thing. That's that campaign.
You stuck, you stuck in a campaign that maybe you shouldn't have, right? And so it was okay to like bow out. It's okay to bow out. And to create a campaign where or to be in a campaign, right, where and I guess really this is a GM's thing too, but also the group, right, to create an environment where if your character dies, you want to come back and do a new one because you want to keep playing this story, but now you get to experience it from like, oh, I get to do like this brand new, like this different history with like a new perspective, and like see how this plays with this group that's mourning my old character's loss, and like be excited genuinely about that. That's a group dynamic thing. If you get attached to your characters, I know that there are people that super get attached to their characters. I've never experienced a character loss the way that you have. I've never experienced a character loss the way that you have. I've had like, you know, in those one shot type of tabletop RPGs, my characters die and it's like, oh well, you know, that's cool. Or like it was a cool death or whatever, and like I get it, it's fine. But like in a long form campaign, I've never really experienced that kind of character death, so I'm not probably the best person to. I'm not. Like I can't really speak that kind of speak to that kind of level, but I think coping with character death. Some of that coping is, I think it's when your character dies, you as a player get to make a decision as to whether you're going to continue with this table or not. Yeah. And with this story. That's true. And if you find that you're not really like, it's not working for you, it's a chance for you to bow out and just move on to something else, move on to bigger and better things. Like you're not beholden to that story. You know what I mean?
So the chat in the chat, Fantasy Grounds College has asked, how do you keep from falling into patterns of play and switching characters? And I think that's a really good question, especially if you die and come back. Like, what's going to stop you from making Leonis 2.0, right? But
for those who don't know, Leonis was my wizard. Leonis Bombastis.
Was he a sorcerer or a wizard?
He was a wizard. He was a wizard. Yeah.
But I have found, and in general, even between games, my strongest tendency is to play an impulsive and charismatic character. That's what I want to do, because that's kind of the opposite of who I am in real life. Like I can't. I'm not a sweet talker, and I'm very ordered, and I don't do things impulsively. So it's like yes, I can do whatever I want, and everyone wants me. Yeah. But then it almost leaks into everything else. Like even with Turbo and Deliverance, I tried to pull them back a little bit, but there was always shades of that
Yeah.
You did really well with Deliverance though, compared to like Turbo being the one that was like, hey, that wall, let's explode it and hop in. Whereas Retro was like, this is a stealth mission. I think you did really well to with Deliverance. And there was definitely some moments, but I mean, that's gonna happen. I mean, that's normal, especially for characters. You're gonna have a moment where you're gonna be like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm gonna explode everything.
I always favor action, and that's not always the best. I do have to. That's one of my weaknesses. I have to pull back and just be like, okay, this character would think about it. This character would, and it's hard because it's less fun.
Yeah. So for me, it's actually the opposite of yours, because I like to play very clever, carefully I like to play very clever characters, and whatever shade of the cleverness is, whether they're kooky or whether they're super Machiavellian or something, I love playing smart people that are going to think 2 steps ahead, right? In some way, or just come up or just improvise a really good idea on the fly. But I think there's a difference between a pattern of play in terms of personality traits that you just kind of gravitate towards that make the game fun for you as a player, versus I guess not switching up a play style in the sense I don't know. I guess I want more specificity of this question from Fantasy Grounds, because I want to know when you say play similarly, are we talking about mechanically I keep playing a wizard over and over but different shades of wizard, or yeah sorry.
I might be able to help out with that, or at least help out with whatever. I don't know if this will actually help. I played a character that was a poisoner in Shadowrun. She threw syringes. She was very seductive.
So cool.
Yeah, she was fucking awesome. And she was she called herself the Angel of Death, even though her runner name wasn't that. She had laced lipstick and everything. Basically, I want to play her again. I really do. And so when she died, which ended up being very nice, it was a very nice death. It's just sad that I couldn't play her.
Why do you have so many characters that have died? What the fuck?
Die a lot.
To be fair, if you want a mini rant about how Darling died, my theory is that the GM didn't like her background and my character, so she got rid of her. Because what happened?
Why do you have such shitty campaigns?
People that you play with.
It's a
no,
curse.
don't name names. Don't name names. But stop immediately with all of them.
What happened was my character's background was Special Snowflake, and I knew that it was going into that. But
no.
Shush. The GM was like, "That's fine. I can work with this," and I was like, "Cool. If we can't do this, I will change it. I will make this work." Didn't end up changing it. She ended up working with it. And we got to a point where we went back to my character's home, a town or whatever, which was this hellscape. And basically, to get out of the hellscape, they had to either hunt down these beasts or kill the thing that was keeping them there, which was basically my character's real heart. And because she's practically immortal. She's been there since the 19 whatevers. And no one told me this, and the GM didn't confirm is this a good idea? Do you want this? Is this okay? And one of the other players conversed with a higher being, because he's the blood mage, and found that was the only way out. At least that's what his being thing told him. So they ended up, or at least he ended up, stabbing her heart, and she had to stay there. She technically died, but it lives within her town, and she has to stay there forever. And if she doesn't, if she leaves, she ages rapidly. And of course that's going to kill her. But so no one told me this. And like I said, it was emotionally good, and it meant something to me because I like tragic characters, and that was a tragic ending that like made sense to me. But at the end of the day, when I relook on it, I just go, that's sketchy. But anyway,
there should have been some consent.
Yeah, exactly. They should have asked me.
There's definitely a line in like, ooh, here's this like really bitchy like secret that you didn't know that, or about an NPC that's close to your character, versus like, here's kind of like this very important detail that your character probably knows about yourself that you want to like, you know, let people know when they're gonna be like approaching your fucking heart. But anyway, to go back, Fantasy Grounds did specify.
Yeah. So basically, I'm not gonna read that right now. Sorry. Anyway, I ended up when I made a new character, I ended up making another character that was thrown weapons. So I knew how that worked. He threw cards. He's a circus performer. Alex Mays. Get it? A maze. Get it? I didn't do that on purpose, I swear.
We'll answer your question shortly, Fantasy Grounds.
But I pretty much ended up, he doesn't have to make him different from Darling, the poisoner, and yet the same, because I wanted a character that threw weapons and was charismatic. I made him not use seduction as a specialization trait. I made him use genuinely like con artist type of techniques, trying to like not persuade them but con them out of stuff. And I made him, instead of being up in front and talking and everything, because at the end of the day he's a face, whereas Darling was a fighter.
Seemed like she had some face type stuff too, though, in terms of like a seduction route versus con artistry route.
Exactly. And so that's, I don't know if that helped. And now I'm reading your question, and I don't think it helped. But
right. So
that's pretty much how I did it.
I think
so let's say the question for like anybody who's watching this video later, because they might not see chat. So Fantasy Ground says it's more personality, how you run your PC, your interactions in character with the others, avoiding metagaming like past knowledge.
Ooh, I cannot answer that for you.
And the thought of changing a PC basically mid game.
I think there's a lot of loops, a lot of mental gymnastics I find, but I try to make it extremely clear to myself. Like, I did not know that the evil vampire slaughtered this entire village. I thought it was something different, and I find I have to keep reminding myself, because it's impossible to not know. You know, like, it's impossible to not know that after you've found it out, and it will affect your actions. That's the thing. I have to acknowledge that it will affect my actions, and I know this, and so I try to watch for where it is affecting. That's for me. That's a good
thing, I guess. If you write down the things that your character knows and the things that your character does not know, that's probably that have occurred right prior. That's a good way to start getting your mental gymnastics organized, right? And then that's a really great point, to look out for those obvious pitfalls in logic where you stop yourself from, you have to like willfully make sure that my character, like, forget that this occurred, right? So that you take your actions honestly. And the thing is, even when people in the party tell this new character the harrowing story of this vampire that destroyed the village, this character didn't experience it. This character thought it was something, in this example, thought it was something different, thought they knew something different,
maybe
or had a different,
believe them.
It doesn't believe them, had a different perspective on the whole thing, and that's not what happened. So I guess that's, and if that is how you're going into it, right, you have acknowledged this pitfall of logic and you've turned it into your character's motivation. And by having motivation is very important Motivation and perspective are very important for your character to proceed, because if you have those up front in your head of how you're gonna how this character is going to be role played, then it's much easier for you to distance yourself from what you've experienced prior. That's my advice and thought.
Oh, totally. That's good. All this talk is making me want to join a long-term D&D game. I have my current one's kind of I have a question for the chat as well as you guys about the role of writing in your game. If you're GMing a game or making a character, how much do you write? Do you write stories? Do you write narratives, like just a little paragraph, a little point form?
I will go first if that's okay, Oz.
Go for it.
I fucking write so hard. It depends on the character, because recently I haven't, because the situations that I've been in with my groups and everything, I haven't really wanted to delve into the character that I'm playing or whatever. And even if I did, I don't think that the other players would care to read it. Because on Roll20, if people don't know, you can post like forums. That's where we do all of our stuff, at least the games that I've been in. It's pretty much like, hey, you can write backgrounds for your characters if you want other people to read them. And I love doing that. I like making up locations and family members and everything like that. And my very first Pathfinder character, I made her family's background, her mother and dad's background, her brother and sisters, what they do, who they're dating, who they're sleeping with, who they're whatever. And then I made my character's boyfriend's background and his father's background.
Oh my gosh!
and then I made, since the guy that she was seeing someone else, I made her background and her family background. And what ended up happening, which I still thank the GM to this day for actually using those characters, was he basically went, hey, you know those characters that you wrote? I'm stealing every single one of them and using it in the campaign.
That's
but
awesome.
I'm gonna twist, and he's like, but I'm gonna twist it up a little bit. And I was like, I don't care, you do you. And I'm just happy that like a character that was being described, I was like, I know that character, and then they said their name, and I was like, I know that character. So that's and that's another thing. If you do write, and if you are a GM, read them and use them to your advantage. If a character has like a lover, kill them. but yeah, no, I don't do that with Join the Anarchy though. I don't do heavy background stuff for like Voltar. I did like a little bit just to give Oz an idea. And I barely anything for retro. And then I did very little for Thomas for Shattered Isles and everything like that. I don't really put a lot of writing into those characters, sadly, just because I don't really feel up to it, and I know that this is a show and it needs to be, usually some campaigns, especially for Anarchy, there's usually it's not railroad, but there's a beginning and end to that session, and to limelight every single thing that you wrote into your background is impossible. So, and since the way it runs, it's so fluid and you can't really do it. And that's kind of how Shattered Isles feels. Granted, we are doing background stuff, and I'm very, very happy we're doing that. And it gives me an opportunity to delve back into both of our characters. But yeah, no, I try to write a lot for my characters, because it also helps me. Yeah, it also helps me get into my character more and what they're dealing with and what they're going through. I also just like, I don't know, I think it adds to the story, at least in my head. I know that with my Inquisitor, he was having a lot of nightmares because of Lamashtu just being a tease. So she basically gave him a bunch of nightmares, and instead of being like, oh, Fairfax didn't get a sleep last night because he had a nightmare, I liked the idea of being like, oh, I'm gonna write it up, and if you guys want to know what actually happened in his nightmare and why he's acting this way, you can read it and you know, delve into it. But I never really bring it up in the campaign. Like, in depth or detail. I usually just go, oh, he didn't get enough sleep last night. Like if someone wants to read that little extra tidbit of why he didn't get that less sleep or whatever, awesome. If not, it's just for me personally, and I like doing that. But like I said, I haven't done it recently, mainly because I don't have the motivation. I don't think the players that I'm with would really care. I think like 2 people would care. So
yeah, well, I was in the campaign where everybody was writing character backgrounds in this forum, and I was just not. I didn't have time to read them. I didn't have time to write them. I respected that you were doing them, and I'm like, maybe one day I'll get to sit down and read these. But for me, it's very much about the experience, right? Like I come to the table with sort of like here's the general. This is who my character is, right? And these are things in his past that have led him to get to this point. I just kind of do like some bullet points and just kind of really think about more or less what I think this character has probably gone through to get to the point they're at the beginning of the campaign. And then from there, I make sure to weave in like, okay, here's some open-ended things, some mysteries, right, that I can just kind of throw the GM's direction and bam, call it a day, and they can find plot hooks. In chat, I noticed, Scrim, you have something to say about plot hooks.
Sorry, I'm just like, there's a whole other conversation going on.
Yeah. Well, so what I was bringing up was that what I'm referring to in chat was that when players particularly write a lot of character background stuff, it is easier for the GM to find plot hooks in those that directly relate to the campaign, and then they become more central focus to the campaign.
And I have an example of that once you're done.
No, go ahead. I was leading you.
I had a character in my off-air D&D campaign from a couple years ago who wrote in like, my character's a wizard, he's obsessed with this book. He found this book and he's like obsessed with learning the mysteries of it. I was like, cool, that book is the Lich's Phylactery. And like he's carrying it around with for all of the book but didn't know. And so I the rest of the players, I got varying shades of like, a couple of pages, or just like I had to constantly message and be like, can you tell me something about your character? I had all shades of different people, but the ones who gave me something, I ended up creating a story that focused more on their characters because their characters were going through something that was plot fundamental. And that was a new GM. That may have been an error to make it so focused on them. And I did my best to try to get everybody a chance in the spotlight. Rats mentioned something about spotlight shifting, because I really can't stand when I'm in a game as a player or a GM and one person isn't participating. But that was another lesson for me, is that some players honestly love spectating.
Yeah.
They like, especially if you're playing online, they might pop their headphones in and like do their dishes and just listen. And that's okay. If their character, as long as they're still contributing and they're taking their turn, they're not delaying things, like, yeah, if you're just listening during the RP and that's who your character is and that's how you want to play, I can be okay with that. But anyway, yes, the more you write for me, the more I'm going to put it into the base story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For me, in terms of spotlight, it's another annoying thing is the opposite, where one player is the center of the campaign, but everyone else is just kind of like the side that they don't really get a spotlight on their character, because the GM, instead of incorporating as many storylines as they can, instead just says, oh, this is the interesting one that I want to go with. I'll figure out the rest later someday. I think I'll go ahead and tell this story again, going back to this D&D game that I played. So it's drop in, drop out. I've had like 15 players over the course of this year that have come in and out. And so that's really hard to put spotlights on people because, it's very, it's session dependent, right? And you can't follow a full storyline sometimes. And obviously some characters I expected to be showing up more often than others because of just availability of schedule of the player, right? It's been great to do because it's allowed us to get together more often than we normally would, because we can assemble whatever group is available and play. I absolutely love the drop in, drop out thing that we set up for this game. But as a GM, that becomes challenging to incorporate storylines.
Totally.
And I've found that sometimes there are players, and there's kind of like a classification that I have where there are players who come into it with a backstory that they don't realize ties in so perfectly to a bunch of stuff. Like you can hook them in to something that you've written, right? Whereas there's other characters who have just as equally a compelling a backstory over here, and it colors who they are, but their real adventure starts at the start of this campaign, and that's their growth. So like, while some things are being looped from some characters' pasts into this, for other, the intrigue is this new thing. So like, I have characters from mine is very urban focused. It's set in a city. So when I have characters that are like from not this city and they're like from the woods, like all of their storylines are left behind out there, and they've come to the city, and now they have to get used to city living. So that's where their story and noble intrigues and all of this, weird shit that cities do. Whereas in other characters brought in, and even characters who brought in stuff from the outside, I was able to find people that like relate to them, and I was able to slowly, as the campaign progressed and I saw which players were becoming more common in my games, focusing on them and finding hooks to bring them in and interest them and tie them into the city, the current storyline that I was setting. So even though their past wasn't coming into play as much, they were growing stakes in the city that they've just moved to. So I think when players give you a story, it's very easy to like, oh, wow, that's perfect. That just like sets off a total chain reaction of possible new events, because like this detail that was so offhand to them just ties in really well into something. But then there's others that like, this is a cool backstory, but I don't know what to do with it yet. I think, it can come up and I can throw, in those cases, I'll find maybe like themes that tie into the game and to the other characters, so that when something happens to these characters, the character whose past isn't really affected right now by the story, or who's not affecting the storyline, has something to relate to and talk about their past, and they get to reveal things about themselves. That's the way that I've had to run things. I feel like
you're talking mostly about our last season of Anarchy.
Well, that's
themes tying together, like it just.
Well, I don't know. I think that's kind of like how I mean, yes, absolutely, I agree. Yeah. I've found that that's helped color a lot of how to play stuff, and like to just kind of.
I think like
with any game that you run, any campaign that you're about to start, you always start with all of these very disparate seeming characters, right? Like everybody comes to the table with this concept that they want to inject into the story, and you already have a story maybe set up, and you're like, how do I bring all these people together? And then like, it's finding those common threads, looping them into yours, and then whatever those threads are, it doesn't necessarily have to be plot. It could be theme. It could be a single character. Totally. It could be all kinds of things. Finding those threads and like, putting together the conspiracy map. That's and that can come from 5 pages of backstory. It can come from a single bullet point. So you never know.
Whenever I write up backgrounds as a player, because I'm not a GM, but as a player, whenever I write up backgrounds and I hand them to the GM, or I, whatever, just for character development, I not intentionally make plot hooks, but there are times I definitely do, where I'm like, oh, they could definitely use this against me. If they choose to use that against me, that's their decision.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, whenever I play a character, like I'm thinking of all my D&D characters, I try to just have fun at the table as is. I never really make like, oh, I'm here searching for my father, that's why I'm out here, which could be a thing, but it kind of sets up the GM to focus on like, oh, they have to find their dad. And I know a lot of GMs would automatically like be like, oh yes, type of thing. We can do that, but I kind of want the GM to write their own story, and that's why I'm there. And so I try making characters with backgrounds that are flexible enough where if nothing of their background comes up, even like a mention of whoever from the GM, I want my character to develop within the story that's currently happening. So to make it, say you have a missing brother, but you don't really, your character doesn't really know or care or anything like that, you can still focus on the campaign at the main campaign that's being taken place, and you can develop your character that way. If your backstory does come up, great. If it doesn't, I don't really mind it, because I get to play my character. Like, for example, I have a Shadowrun character who barely has anything to tie into the main campaign right now, except his dad did something horrible and wants to apologize to his son. So his dad's searching for his son, but with a character that I'm playing doesn't really know that that's happening or anything like that. But I definitely gave it to the GM for a reason to use it, and it has yet to come up. Whereas the other two people that I play with, they have backgrounds that definitely have already come up, and one of them that we're already kind of working on. And I don't care if mine doesn't come up or not. I actually really enjoy playing my character and being like, hey, I had family problems as a kid. I can help you out with this. I'd love to help you.
And you know what? Sometimes it's really fun when you kind of even forget the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you just forget because, like, oh, I'm not expecting it to come up. And then all of a sudden, you brought this
Exactly.
up. Oh, I thought you're
totally.
evil.
Yeah.
But I do think that it can be a fallacy to think that if you come in with a motivation, like I'm here to find my father, that the GM has to loop in the father, because motivations can change, right? And you might, but and things, and then like you might have your motivation to find your father now might become, I need to find my father after I do this, right? And I think as a GM, sometimes I need to find my father can be looped into whatever you're writing, really, and not like a total side quest. You can include it in, like, you set up this big bad evil person already, have them be a captive in their lair, and then now you have not just you're defeating the bad guy, but now you're like, oh, father, you're here, and then I need to get you out, and now you have to like escort this character's father through the to safety or whatever, and like, so, or find out that they're there to fight and they're gonna lead the revolution of prisoners or whatever. Like, there's ways to loop in those kinds of goals in surprising ways than to do the video game thing, which is to have the special character side quest, and then tie that up in a neat little bow and said, oh well, now we're best friends, thanks. Like, it's really good to just kind of like loop those in whenever.
I think another thing for writing that I wanted to add is I don't know if you guys do this, but for a lot of the campaigns that I've done is side role playing, where your characters say they're at a tavern or whatever, and you guys end the game. You end this game session at a tavern, and you're like, well, great. And like, I feel like the obvious would be like, oh, they just go to bed. But like, what if two of these characters stayed up and talked about something? And I really love that. I love that. I love those moments when you can make it happen organically. It's so good. And so like, I know that the majority of that time doesn't take place in game, and you definitely are just doing it between you and the other player. Hence why, like, most of the time when I do that with people, we post it up on the forum on Roll20 so people can read that. But But and so can the GM, so they know that those two characters are either getting along or they're talking about certain events, or they're theorizing or whatever. But I like doing that, and like I said, that in my head doesn't really damage or fold the game itself in a way. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't. It's not important, but it's important to you and that other player.
It enriches it. It absolutely
I
does.
like doing it.
So I listened to a couple of different podcasts that have helped me kind of inform both my GMing and playing, and both of them do this to a certain extent. One of them's Glass Cannon, and they always they're very focused on the game, and they're very precise in combat. But they always leave moments like at the fire or when you're walking, and I try to let players do this. Some players love it, some are not into it. But they're all actors, so they all get right into it, and you have these amazing conversations about their characters' motivations and fears and all this stuff, and I love that. And the other one is the Adventure Zone, which they do that a little bit less because they're a lot lighter in tone and very goofy and not quite as game focused, but they'll occasionally allow little corners where they conversations, and it's just those are little moments in the podcast that I live for, and I try to let every game have them. And if I'm a GM and I just take my hand off the wheel and the players are just talking and doing stuff, and I don't have those are just the most amazing moments when they're just taking the story and just weaving something new, and you're like, ah!
I 100% agree. 100% agree. When you just let the players kind of be and make the moments themselves that they think are important, it's just I don't know. It's magical.
Magical. Oh
it's
my gosh.
Magical. Yeah. I know that I've mentioned, I think I might have mentioned this to you on one of our off-camera chats after games, that one of the things that I like to do for my D&D game, because it was drop in, drop out, it was we have to wrap this stuff up in a session. We don't have time to ramble on for an hour and a half with a conversation, even as interesting it may be. I'll say, have whenever they do a short rest or a long rest or something like that, or they're walking somewhere, I'll be let's tell me one thing that your character reveals about themselves to the party.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of go round table, and then at some point it just kind of
like that.
If somebody really wants to press on it, they might players just naturally respond and be wait, so how did that lead to you being here? And then that kind of
I love the natural responses. Those are my favorite moments where people get invested and they ask, they're not doing it because their character has to. It's they're genuinely interested. I love those moments.
And I found with reluctant players that I could ask them directly, tell me what was your character thinking at this time. And sometimes if I know they're really reluctant, I'll give them a warning, I'm just curious about this and I'm going to bring it up, just so that they're not
yeah.
And so, yeah.
There's a lot of my the DM that I usually run with outside of Twitch. The way they would do it was basically, what is your character doing right now? And so it puts you on the spot, and you're basically oh, well, they're just doing this, or
sharpening a sword, or
I like that you directly ask them a question that brings up a topic. I really like that, because that it's a kindling to your fire. Yeah,
I agree. I will say, maybe a hot take, I find the question, what is your character doing right now, to be not good enough, because especially with reluctant players, they're I'm having some ale, sharpening my sword.
Exactly.
Does not advance your character.
That's
we
nice.
learned nothing. This is you at your most basic. You're not giving me anything. So you have to go a step deeper, and that's why I go what is something that your character reveals about themselves, or what is is there something that you want to address to the team, something that's bothered you? You can ask a couple of leading questions like that, just to kind of And now I do it for the sake of expediency, but it's led to some really interesting results, and it's led to like where they are now.
Yeah, like
when they reveal. Yeah, but I think it's a cool way, especially in a game like D&D where like the battles could take like an hour and a half, 2 hours, because like my god, like to be able to kind of like condense that and still make it interesting. You have to use those like leading questions.
I have a question for you two. Before actually after I have to pee, so I will ask this question later.
Actually, I was gonna say it's midnight for us. We've been gabbing for like 2.5 hours. No breaks.
Do you want
Thanks
my
for that
last
follow,
question?
Rhino Hide. Yeah, go ahead. We'll make this the last question of the night, and then we'll wrap up.
As GMs, because I'm curious how you guys do this shit, because I can't. If you have a really long battle that's like going on for an hour, which in my opinion is too long, but how do you balance that with roleplay and combat?
The one bit of roleplay I allow in those, sometimes people will shout things out, but if it's a long drawn out battle, I am not gonna pause for someone's introspective moment unless it's like plot critical. So I give them the opportunity to describe their hits and their kills, and that's kind of it.
I give, like, I'm particularly thinking of like the last session in particular, because that had such an impact.
Yeah, that was so heavy and everything.
It was heavy, but like even those battles felt like, even though they dragged, because oh god, those battles fucking dragged.
Yeah,
and it's it was 7 players, like a bajillion different things coming at them with like high hit points. I think when you describe, as a GM, when you describe when you take moments, because like you could tell the player like, hey, describe the kill, describe the hit, whatever, but like sometimes I think adding in and embellishing that action with that stuff, and really kind of like, especially if you're playing with minis, like you kind of like take a look at lay of the land and be like, how does this get switched up to be like, how do I make this environment interesting? How do I change it up, right? Because like sometimes I think the excitingness of an action scene is the environment more so than the enemy.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Like, how are you fighting them? 100%. And like, and like what are the problems and the challenges? So like having to fight on top of a bunch of bodies, or like in that last scenario, like somebody like planted a webs down the middle of this room, and so everybody had to fight on the outskirts of the room, so like they had to like fight their way to like this giant statue that they needed to bash down. It was environment really adds to the flavor of that scene, so it's not necessarily in role play heavy, but it's evocative. I think that's what the word is. You want to be evocative. You want to put those characters into motion.
That's a good word.
And you want to put the characters in I said motion, the characters in the moment.
In the moment,
yeah, and especially because you're taking an action scene that in a movie, or even in the game itself, where they're saying like each round is 6 seconds, right? Like this would be a 30-second action scene, or be a couple of minutes, right? In a movie, and it's being stretched out over so much time. You have to keep it fresh and interesting, and to do that, you have to, again, keep them in that moment. Make each hit feel like something. Make each obstacle feel like something that needs to be overcome right now, because fuck my life, we have to kill the thing. Like, I think that's probably and I try to, if I have a really big combat and lots of players, I'm like, okay, Oz's turn, Paige, you're on deck. Okay, Paige's turn, Trav, you're on deck. And so then like people are getting ready, because if you have 7 players, I've been there, it's like this initiative list this long, and you're like, I have barely any time to put anything into context or anything. I'm like, okay, hit, done. It's just so crazy.
So yeah, people can get distracted. They pull out their phones, they do something else, and that makes it take longer. So please don't do that if you're a player, please.
Exactly. That's something as a player that irritates me too. There's definitely been multiple campaigns that I've been in where even if like there's 4 people, there's always that one person that's like, fuck, I don't know what to do, and then they just kind of stand and stare at the map for hours.
Why didn't you think about
why didn't you think of multiple different why didn't you think of multiple different scenarios? And I understand that the map changes and it's hard for you to be like, well, shit, because I've definitely have been that player that's like, well, you already healed that person, I don't really need, I'm just okay, I'm gonna fucking cast this and wait for my next turn and focus on hitting something or focus on doing something. And because I've been in combat that has taken up to 5 hours, and I've been like disengaged from that combat and that whole scenario because I'm like, this is taking too long. And half the time the players don't know what they want to hit. And it's just, I don't know, they're definitely the longest combat sessions that I've been in, I was bored. There's also combat sessions where, that's another question I should ask you guys too, is I've been in sessions where my character's been downed or someone else's character's been downed and they can't do anything and nothing happens for 3 hours and you can't play.
Awful.
It sucks. I hate when that happens.
Yeah. So like I know
feel really bad for those players.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that, like, as a GM you can't really do anything because you can't, you don't want to like purposely go in there and be like, oh, you're healed, you can play again, but like, I don't know, that's an awkward balance too, because I've definitely been in that position where one of my characters was transformed into a sparrow, and it was permanent until the end of combat, and one of the villains came by just to check out how we were doing. He was like pretending to be our best friend even though we hated his guts. Then he transformed her back into herself. But it was technically permanent, which, one, I hate permanent spells because of that moment. That combat lasted for 3 hours. And halfway
you were
through,
a sparrow the whole time.
And I was a sparrow, and I was doing one D2 damage by pecking, and my health went down and all that shit. And yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, fright's another thing that I don't like, is because you run away and you can't do anything, and if you keep failing fright, you just keep running and you're like, well, I can't fucking do anything, and it's just annoying. But like, I hate permanent spells because when something like that happens, or for example, one-shot spells, like in that same campaign, someone's follower failed their will save on this like cryptic beast, and this beast caused, like, I forgot what it was like intense fear and terror, and they basically died of a heart attack, and it was that full health gone. And I was upset for that character. That player was upset, and I don't blame them. Like, that was just pure BS in my opinion, because it doesn't give it doesn't give the player a chance to do anything about it. That's one thing. Like, I love that you gave antidotes to your players and they got to choose what they do with it. And multiple campaigns, I know for a fact, in my first campaign that I ran, if that was actually a thing, we would have not gotten antidotes. And if we did, we may have gotten like 3 or 2. So like, So like, I'm curious of how you guys handle down players.
So, okay, for downed players, and I didn't do this, but now that it's been mentioned, I probably should start doing it. For a downed player, ask them, like, you're downed, but you're still like, in your fleeting moments of consciousness, what is it that you're seeing? What is it that you're thinking? Like, tell us something, and then go ahead and roll your death saving throw. Like, you could do something like that so that they still have a character moment. At least they get to bring something up and they get to watch the battle raging around them and describe something epic from their perspective as they're dying, and like hoping that someone will come and help them so that they can get back up and fight. For the sparrow thing, okay. If I come at, obviously, like, as a GM, if I know that I have this spell on hand that I can use to turn someone into a sparrow, I have to then think, I have to go a step further, right? if I'm going to inflict this on a player, what can a sparrow do in a fight? Like, is there a rope to a chandelier that they can pull to drop the chandelier? Is there a thing that needs to be carried, a little item
that can be carried
from one place to another? Yeah, like, is there something, or is there something that can, like a puzzle piece that needs to be carried from thing to thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, while the fighting is happening, this sparrow
that would have been cool.
Could have somehow opened up a door. I don't know, like.
Something to incorporate it.
Something to at least have, like, you're not fighting, you're not able to deal damage, but you're able to play with the environment. Like, you're given something to do as a result of being a sparrow that, it's not as awesome as dealing 80 fucking hit points of damage.
But you're at least doing something.
But you're contributing.
Exactly.
That's the thing, is you're contributing.
Or I'd save it to the end. Make it a dramatic thing, like, now you're a sparrow forever, ha, or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if this villain wasn't there, I would have been a sparrow forever, and I would have been furious if that had happened. Because one, like I said, that's something that, like, the fuck do I do now? Like, my character's is fucking, all right, I'm done. Like, I'm walking from that campaign. If that had happened, I would have left.
I would hope that, okay. Because there's a couple of ways to tackle that. One is, obviously, like, if you're making someone a sparrow, there has to be maybe a discussion with that player first, or after, or very close by, like, hey, listen, trust me, like, you'll be fine, right? Like, even just getting that assurance would put you in a better state of mind to play up your sparrowness until it's taken off of you. Or alternatively, like, also, like, having an inherent trust in a GM is good as well, because you know that, you might be fucking up my character, but there's going to be something that comes of this.
Trusted him.
You misplaced trust. The other thing, the other side to this coin is maybe the player really is going to, for some reason, enjoy being a sparrow for an entire session and just want to roleplay a sparrow and live their sparrow fantasy. But I don't know, like, but that's, like, few and far between. And again, even in all those cases, it's give that player something to do.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Now, in the case of the heart attack, immediate heart attack, I find.
Yeah,
but
like,
did they at least get a spell, like a death saving throw, or they just died?
They did.
Just died?
That's the thing. They got a.
Not a saving throw, but, like, did they get death saving throws? That's not a thing in Pathfinder, though. Never mind.
No,
so they
it was
just
immediate.
died. It's done. It's done. Character's dead.
There's something like that in Pathfinder.
Yeah, they failed their will save, and it was immediate. Yeah. They didn't get any saves or anything.
Well, in those cases, right, like, have well, first off, yes, like, I would go with Scrim's suggestion that should happen somewhere near the end, dramatic moment, like, and then, so, like, they're dead for the least amount of time possible to give a moment for a dramatic thing, but then having the ability. I mean, Pathfinder, luckily, like, resurrection and D&D, resurrection is cheap. Relatively, I mean, not if you're, like, super low level, but, like, there's chances for it.
We also didn't have that as an option. I remember at the beginning that was, but like,
then
a
the
thing
GM has to put that in there as an option.
Okay. That wasn't gonna happen.
If I'm going to inflict the possibility of instant death on you, I need a way out for that.
Yeah,
because
and make it a hard choice. Make it as something difficult to do, but, like, if it's not like a noble battle death that was hard fought, then you gotta have some give and take, because yes, we want to treat it like a reality a little bit, but at the end of the day, we're playing a game and we want everyone to have fun.
Agreed. Always have a way out. Again, that's why I included those antidotes, because that would have sucked major ass. That's a punk ass way to go dying by poison because you chose to eat a single, like, mulberry from a plate.
It's also frustrating where it's like, well, I didn't bring my detect poison, or I didn't bring my restoration spell, like, fuck me, like, I definitely would have,
but that's not, oh my God, I was so relieved when our cleric didn't take detect poison, but but either way, like,
you know what I mean.
But either way, it's like, it shouldn't hinge on someone not taking something. There should always be solutions, alternate solutions and stuff like that. And especially fail safes when you are going to dick your characters like that. Have an absolute fail safe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, have some kind of contingency. I agree.
All right, guys, I gotta pee.
And we gotta go.
Really
Show's
bad.
over, everybody.
Thanks for the great chat, everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You
Chat
can
with
follow
Papa was
us.
Great combo tonight.
Agreed. Yeah. No, this is fun, and I didn't.
We need
fun,
more of
happy
these.
accidents. I agree. More chats. This is very informative, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of it on this podcast that Scrim is being cagey about.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is gonna be on Twitch. So
Nice.
I will let you know.
So, you rather than doing an outro of us, you can follow us at that Twitter handle and that Twitter handle and this Twitter handle, and see you all in 2 weeks for our actual play of Cyberpunk Red Punk's Not Dead. And have a great night, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, guys.
Bye.
I kept doing that thing where I need to pee